faff about parties at number 10. That is all for our show tonight. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Cressida Wetton. Headliners is back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. And remember, if you're watching the 5am repeat, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show, which is on just after the break.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Boris Johnson clashes with MPs over Partygate as his revolt against Rishi Sunak crumbles in the Commons.
Good morning. At 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 23rd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Very good to have you on board leading the news this morning.
And I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about.
Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said accusations he misled the Commons are complete nonsense as he clashed with MPs during a heated hearing into whether he lied.
It comes as a rebellion that he backed against Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal is easily defeated in the Commons despite opposition from 3 former Conservative leaders.
The US Federal Reserve has raised interest rates by a quarter point, increasing the likelihood that the Bank of England will do exactly the same today. The move comes amid a shock rise in inflation to 10.4%.
And Prince William has thanked British troops in Poland for defending freedom during a secret visit to a military base near the Ukraine border. The Prince of Wales also visited a refugee centre in Warsaw, where he met displaced women and children.
So what are we doing near the Ukraine border? It's quite interesting to what we're not aware of British troops being in Poland, and if they're there, who are they backing up in Ukraine? What exactly do they do? That would be interesting to know. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or you can get in touch with us on Twitter at GBnews. So Boris Johnson, he got a haircut yesterday to make himself look very presentable, but were his arguments presentable as he clashed with MPs during a very long grilling, 3 hours, over allegations he lied to Parliament?
Well, here are some of the key moments from yesterday's hearing.
I'm here to say to you, hand on heart, that I did not lie to the House. When those statements were made, they were made in good faith and on the basis of what I honestly knew and believed at the time. We avoided physical contact. We didn't, for instance, as the guidance says, we didn't touch each other's pens. We didn't pass stuff to each other if we could possibly avoid it. We kept. Though not every, I would not wish to say that was perfectly implemented.
Presumably, people were passing drinks to each other because we've seen the picture.
Of course. And I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. Most important of all, if it was obvious to me that these events were contrary to the guidance and the rules, then it must have been equally obvious to dozens of others, including the most senior officials in the country, all of them, most of them like me, responsible for drawing up the rules, and it must have been obvious to others in the building, including the current Prime Minister. Nobody raised with me or had any concern before I stood up on December the 1st about those events.
You did not ask.
I asked. I did say this is complete nonsense. I mean, complete nonsense. I asked the relevant people. They were senior people.
If you make the rules, why would you ask anybody? You know, if you say social distancing, you can't see a dead relative, you can't go to a funeral, you can't go to a wedding, you can't go... Surely then you don't really need to ask anybody.
What's your wonderful phrase?
Anything.
A blind man and a galloping horse could see.
Yes, a blind man on a galloping horse.
Galloping.
Yes, could see what was right or wrong. This questioning came as Parliament voted on a key part of Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal.
Well, despite opposition from 3 former Conservative leaders, it actually passed easily. Let's get the take now of the Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, to look back at what was being dubbed Super Wednesday. So, how did Boris do? And I suppose the best way to assess it is, did it pass the sniff test?
Well, I think with this Partygate inquiry, who hadn't made up their minds already before the event, I don't think that Boris will have changed anyone's mind with his fairly unconvincing excuses, but I also don't think that the people grilling him will have changed anyone's mind who thinks he, has been hard done by, because his team say it's, a bit of a stitch-up. No one is, so in that sense, it's not going to move the dial significantly on public opinion.
Except, maybe not on public opinion, but if that is correct, if it hasn't changed anyone's minds, then he's done for, isn't he? Because the Privileges Committee quite clearly showed disbelief in their questioning.
He could be in trouble. There's different ways that he could be punished. So he could be suspended. If he's suspended for a certain amount of time, that could trigger a by-election. I think that seems unlikely. That seems like an overly harsh punishment. He may be found to have recklessly misled Parliament in the jargon rather than deliberately misled Parliament. But, I think at the end of the day, I think we've all made up our minds as to whether he was telling the truth or not. Johnson's excuse is that number 10 was a Victorian house, it's super cramped, no one was really able to social distance in it, and he claims that the rules allowed for that. I'm not convinced that will wash with most people.
What is the public appetite on this? We can understand him being brought to book, brought to heel within the House. Outside the House, what do you think people are thinking, or do they care?
I think people definitely cared when Partygate was first revealed. I think especially, remember when we saw that Allegra Stratton video where she was seen to be sort of laughing at the parties? I think that unleashed, quite rightly, a lot of public anger. People had been prevented from seeing loved ones, prevented from having just an ordinary social life, and knowing that, the people who made the rules were laughing and joking at them, that obviously upset people. But from now on, we've been raking over the coals of this incident for months on end now. I think people would want to move on. You know, if we are going to be discussing the COVID period, shouldn't we be discussing the rules themselves? They seem to have had nowhere near enough scrutiny. You know, considering the amount of liberties that we gave up, considering the harms that were caused to health and to schooling. That seems to me a much more important thing to be discussing. You know, where's the inquiry over these lockdown files into Matt Hancock's texts? MPs should have been discussing that, I think, instead of spending 4 hours on Partygate.
YouGov issued a poll yesterday afternoon. Do you think Boris Johnson is honest or dishonest? Of Conservative voters, 51% said dishonest, and of the general public, that went up to 72%. Speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's hardly surprising. I mean, again, I don't think anyone is buying Boris Johnson's defence. I think everyone could see that these parties were, you know, not above board. And, you know, he's resting on some real technicalities. You can see he's actually been quite careful in his phrasing about talking about who he asked. He always talks about he implicitly believed. That's not a normal thing to say. That's a very legalistic kind of way of getting out of saying I didn't think that they were, you know, they were parties, because everyone else can see that they were.
What about when he was questioned, do you think this is a kangaroo court? And he essentially said he would only trust the Privileges Committee if they let him off.
Yeah, heads I win, tails you lose type situation. I mean, his argument is that Harriet Harman had essentially already said he was guilty, which is not good. I mean, the Privilege Committee isn't a proper court, thankfully. If it were, then yes, you would be a bit worried about it. But MPs are always going to have their own. They're always going to bring their own political judgments to bear on these issues.
But it was the Conservatives, Sir Bernard Jenkin, who was probably the toughest and got the most upset out of him, wasn't it?
Definitely. I mean, but now the Tories are so split. And have been for several years now, especially over Brexit, that if you're of the Boris camp, you could also dismiss that as part of the cabal. So he will always wriggle out of it.
Let's talk about that. It was a huge government win on that Brexit vote yesterday. So the line in the sand with the three former prime ministers all voting against it. Have they achieved anything?
I don't know if they've achieved anything, but it is interesting how... I mean, I was surprised at the size of the vote for the Windsor Framework, but that's because, I suppose, Labour and all the other parties rode in behind it. So it's interesting. I do think that the deal is a problem, and you could sort of tell that it's not quite up to snuff by the way that the government arranged the vote. So there was only 90 minutes of scrutiny allowed for it. They were only allowed to vote on the Stormont break aspect of it, which is supposedly to give more democratic say to the people of Northern Ireland. The European Research Group, who voted against the bill, say that that's actually functionally useless. So it is strange that, yeah, when the government is sending out all these signals unwittingly that actually this deal isn't really up to snuff, MPs still have backed it. I think there's just a lot of them just want to put Brexit behind them. They want the feeling that it's done and they don't want to have to think about it again. They don't want it to be an issue at the next election, for instance. So, yeah.
Finally, tax returns published by the Prime Minister during a busy afternoon. Some were cynical about his timing of that. But look, we already knew he was rich. He's in the Sunday Times rich list, 250 or something, richer than the King.
Yeah.
Tax returns kind of bear that out.
Yeah, and they've showed that he earned nearly £2 million last year, both from his income but also from various assets. He's got lots of money in a blind trust, lots of it in America. But as you say, yeah, we already knew he was rich. The scandal surrounding Sunak's tax affairs was actually to do with his wife and her non-dom status. She's believed to have avoided £20 million worth of tax over the years. Publishing Sunak's own tax returns doesn't actually clear that up at all. So it's not really sure. I'm not really clear what the point is.
Except she's a private citizen, so there's no expectation that she should.
She shouldn't have to publish her tax returns. But I also don't like the expectations that politicians should have to do this, as if there's some kind of it makes, as if filing the correct tax returns just makes you a virtuous citizen or a good politician. It doesn't really make sense. The Americans can do it if they like it, but it's not really how we do things.
Well said, Fraser. Interesting. Fraser Myers from Spiked there. Appreciate it. Are we speaking again later?
Yes.
OK, look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed. Time, 11 minutes past 6. A very good morning to you. The Bank of England will make a decision on interest rates today after inflation yesterday, we reported, unexpectedly jumped to 10.4%.
Well, overnight, the US Federal Reserve raised its rate by 0.25%, which now increases the likelihood that the UK will follow suit.
But it comes amid concerns that continuing increases could further destabilise the banking system. Here to talk to us is Head of Financial Analysts at AJ Bell, Danny Houston. Danny, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What way do you see things going today, Danny?
I think there is only one way that things are going to go today, and that there will be an additional 0.25 percentage point interest rate hike by the Bank of England. Now, it is going to be a difficult decision for the bank, and if you'd have asked me just a couple of days ago, markets were really on the fence, 50-50, as whether or not there would be an increase or whether or not the bank would hold fire. You've got to remember the Bank of England was the first to jump way back in December 2021 and started that interest rate hiking cycle. And there had been rumblings that maybe we were getting towards the end and maybe there would be a pause this time around. There's certainly been some dissent among members of the Monetary Policy Committee. But as you say, with inflation at 10.4%, that surprise jump, it just tells you that the Bank of England's job isn't done. It's got a target of 2% and it's nowhere near that.
So I think used the phrase, it's not an inevitability that inflation will come down when those shock figures came out. What are the implications, of raising interest rates? Why is there sort of a jitteriness about it, given what's happened in the last few weeks with the banking system?
Because if you raise interest rates, you make it more expensive to borrow money. And it also means that a lot of the bonds that our banks hold are worth less. Now, that's not an issue with those bonds if those banks don't need to sell them. And we've been told by regulators, by central banks and by high street banks themselves that our banking system is secure. And certainly there's no indication that the issues that we've seen in a number of smaller banks in the United States and Credit Suisse, which has been having problems for a number of years, there's no indication that that will spill over into the wider banking system. But we do know that banks are now going to potentially be more cautious, and that means they won't lend. They won't want to take as much risk when it comes to lending. And that in itself impacts the economy. It slows things down, which of course is what the Bank of England is trying to do anyway. So perhaps what's happening in the banking sector will actually do some of the work that the Bank of England has been trying to do. However, there have been concerns that it will cause further destabilisation. But I do think at the moment the Bank of England has to demonstrate that it is really serious about bringing prices down, because for ordinary people, those high prices are just eye-watering at the moment. They're causing a huge amount of harm. When you go shopping, you're having to pay a little bit more every time, and a lot of budgets just can't stretch any further.
Yeah, sometimes a big bit more every time as well. But Danny, when you're talking about spending money or lending money from the banks, does it matter what they lend money on? For instance, is there a difference between me putting a conservatory on the back of my house and someone hiring 2 more staff for an engineering company?
If you're spending money on putting a conservatory behind your house, then you are paying somebody's wages to put that conservatory behind your house. You're paying for someone to build that conservatory, for the raw materials to be gathered. So no, where the money is spent doesn't really make a difference. What the Bank of England is trying to do is effectively take some money out of the system to cool things down. So that is why we do know that these interest rate hikes come with a degree of pain. game because it does mean the economy is slowing down. That said, what the Bank of England doesn't want to do is completely stall the engine entirely. It does still want the economy to keep ticking over just a little bit, because if that doesn't happen, of course, then we fall into recession. And what has happened with the banking situation over the last few weeks has certainly created more of a possibility that a recession might be round the corner, when, of course, at the moment, it has looked like the UK has escaped recession.
Danny?
Hewson, Head of Financial Analysis at AJ Bell, also got the purple memo. Good to see. Thanks very much for your analysis this morning.
Thank you very much, Steve. Purple is a colour in Lent, though, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
And then we get all colourful come Easter.
Yeah. All the greens come out again, or whatever it is. Or green's the Advent colour, isn't it? I don't know. I'm showing where. I love the colour purple. Makes me think of Cadbury's and chocolate.
Yes. Very
I like
true.
milk tray.
There was a film called The Colour Purple.
Is there? Not seen it.
Oprah Winfrey was in it. Yeah.
You know me.
I think it was about slavery.
Oh.
16 minutes past 6. I'm going to bring you up to date with the rest of today's stories while someone gets me a cushion for this chair, because I feel...
No, you're a bit low down.
I feel like a leprechaun beside you this morning.
A tiny little man.
Tiny little man. A little teeny weeny man like Rishi Sunak. Yes. Little teeny perfect man.
But can I just, before we get into the... My kids, when I got home yesterday, said to me, Mummy, why was Uncle Eamonn saying that the Prime Minister is so tiny? Isn't that a bit mean? Will he get in trouble?
That's because, children, he is a bit tiny. He's tiny, weeny,
he's
teeny.
The Prime Minister. I'm not sure you can
tiny
say
little
that.
He's got little toy clothes that he puts on.
From your tiny little chair there, I'm not sure you can talk.
I can lecture on that. And the Labour leader promises to halve levels of violence against women and girls within 10 years if the party takes office. As he unveils his party's plans to tackle crime, Sir Keir Starmer will also pledge to raise confidence in the police, following Baroness Casey's report into the Met.
The RMT unions called off strikes that were due to be held at the end of the month. It comes as discussions continue between the union and the rail delivery group in an attempt to long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
The Prince of Wales will speak with Ukrainian refugees and pay tribute to what he terms the inspiring humanity of Polish people. On the second day of his surprise visit, the Prince says the trip will allow him to thank troops and underline his support for Polish people. Now, do you, if something's wrong with you, do you Google it? Do you sort of think, I've got a pain here, what does that actually mean? And is Dr. Google turning you into a hypochondriac?
Or a cyberchondriac.
Oh.
You know, an internet hypochondriac. I like that little...
Well, I'd rather know than not know.
Yes, but sometimes they tell you too much, you know, and sometimes it's worst case scenario that sends you spiralling. It's not a good thing.
So we're going to talk to a clinical psychologist about the rise in what is termed health anxiety. Hopefully that'll have you worried after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 6:21. Still to come on the programme this morning, from saving money and time to staying healthy. At 6:45, our favourite chef, Theo Michaels, is inviting us into his kitchen to tell us about the benefits of meal prepping. This is something I'm a big believer in. When you're busy and you want to make sure you're putting healthy things and also not blowing the budget on takeaways or fast food, this is an absolute must-do. So
Prep is everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so good.
And Camilla Parker Bowles, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Helena Bonham Carter, Sacha Baron Cohen. Oh, too many names. 7:20, we're going to be talking about if the increasing trend of double-barreled surnames is a step in the right direction for equality or just a lot of needless old fuss.
Or maybe it's nothing to do with equality. Is it equality? I don't think it's about equality. I think it's just about people trying to sound fancy.
Do you know, well, I don't know, there's so many footballers. Goodness me, you can't. It sounds as if you're reading out the team with some of the players. They've got all these names. Oh, but anyway,
Yes.
why do you need all these names? I mean, I have just simple Eamonn Holmes.
What if you have a horrible
That's me.
name, you know, or you want to pay tribute to someone? I'm lucky because I use my maiden name for work and my married name on my passport and everything else. So I'm really, you know, I get to keep my old name. Yeah, I quite like that. Anyway, we're going to be debating it hotly. We love these new debates. We do them every day about 7:20, gets everybody discussing it. We'd love your views this morning.
Yes, and if you've got a particularly long name, let us know about it. So it is the 3rd anniversary of lockdown today, and in that time, we've all become much more aware of health things.
And that's not really helped by so-called Dr. Google, with a drastic rise in health anxiety being fuelled by people self-diagnosing their symptoms online.
Joining us now, clinical psychologist Dr. Sarah Bishop, who can tell us more about all of this. Hello, Dr. Sarah.
Good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabel. How are you?
Well, funny you should ask. But look, what difference does it make if I find out more about myself, if I've got a procedure to go through, or if I've got some sort of nagging complaint and I Google it and I think, well, there's the possibility that it could be that. What's the harm in that?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because a certain level of information, I'm researching on Google to find out, what might be going on with us or what we need to know, is a sensible, healthy thing to do. The difficulty is, when does it stop being a normal level of checking that we need to do in order to keep us healthy and well, and when does it spill over into obsessive checking that's actually increasing our anxiety and making us feel worse?
You know, there is a distinction, isn't there, between a hypochondriac, someone who's always got aches and pains and a bit whingy, and someone who has a mental health problem with health anxiety. And I'm talking about, in my case, a really good friend of mine who, after childbirth, and I think it can be triggered by big events in your life, she was so anxious. I would have these conversations for half an hour where she was absolutely convinced. She convinced me that she had skin cancer. And then she'd go and see her GP and they'd be like, no, you're fine. And then the following week it was something else. Yesterday she messaged me because she saw the report about the pill and the coil and she's in a complete spiral about that. I mean, it's a genuine condition. It's not just hypochondria.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a real struggle for some people. And as you've mentioned there can often be triggering events that cause that extra level of anxiety. So, for example, when we think about what we've all lived through with the pandemic, that really shattered, for many of us, our belief in certainty in the world, in our ability to be able to predict things. And once that sense of safety is shattered, whilst it might have been an illusion anyway, because we can never be 100% certain about anything, the anxiety increases, and it can lead us to focus that anxiety onto other aspects of our life, our health, for example.
But you see, here's something we're going to talk about later on in the programme. Misophonia. Now, you will know what misophonia is, and it's where people have real problems with noises. Now, my wife was in a newspaper at the weekend, and they had Ruth Langsford, who suffers from misophonia, and she went bucked off. She went really annoyed about this, right? I said, this is only happening because you say I have misophonia. Yes, I have Googled it, because she reacts, Dr. Sarah, to heavy breathing, yawning, slurping, sniffing, chewing.
Gosh, you do that all in about the space of 2 minutes.
So basically, if I breathe, it's a problem to her, and she runs out of the room. Now, the very fact, what I don't understand about her is that she has obvious reaction to noise. She's intolerant of noise. She's intolerant of me, particularly. But why would she not be interested in Googling that? She's the antithesis of what we're talking about. She won't check anything or take tablets for anything, and yet she's got everything because I'm Googling
You're
it.
terrible.
I should have been a doctor. I should have been a doctor.
Hopefully she's watching now. I would love to have been a doctor.
But see, so many people, Doc, will have this misophonia, and they're making their partner's lives a misery. Quite frankly, a misery. And they won't know it. So I'm saying to our listeners and viewers today, if you're irritated by someone sniffing, slurping soup...
Slurping's disgusting. There's no excuse for slurping. You shouldn't
But that's
slurp.
only interpretation. I mean, I could be sipping soup, but I'm regarded as this. So I'm doing this, and she hears this.
Yeah.
That's what she hears.
That's real to her.
I know it is.
So,
yes.
you know, imagine how she's feeling.
Yes, but anyway, am I not doing a good job, Doc, by researching misophonia?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because some of us do have an extra sensitivity to, you know, what we hear, what we feel, particularly in our bodies in terms of our senses. And there is a link there, again, with that health anxiety. For those of us who are very tuned in to those inner experiences, so for example, changes in our body, we can start to overthink them, overfeel them, and overfocus on them. So a good example, which most of us can relate to, is, you know, if, for example, I started to speak to you about head lice and how they are very itchy and how they lay eggs in your hair, most of us will start to kind of reach for our head and start to feel which just goes to show, you know, when we do have certain thoughts in our minds and we pay lots of attention to them, we can start to exacerbate those thoughts, give those thoughts more power, and actually make them become quite real.
So, how do you stop yourself overthinking?
Google it.
Yeah, really good question. Don't Google it. No, you know, Google is a wealth of information for many things, but what you'll find is it will often give you lots of generic information that doesn't necessarily apply to you. So I think the first step actually for overthinking is to understand and accept that, firstly, it's really quite normal. You know, it's normal for us to have worries about our health. It's a good thing that we have a certain level of concern, and we need to understand what proportion of that concern is keeping us healthy, well, and safe, and what proportion of that concern is taking us into that obsessive, increased health anxiety territory. So, for example, checking for lumps without in breasts or testicles. Experts recommend we do that once a month. If we're doing that more than once a month, and if we're seeking reassurance about that more than once a month and absorbing what's on Google more than once a month, if we're doing that daily or weekly, that's too much. To have an awareness about what's healthy and normal to keep us safe. Also, recognise and perhaps explore within yourself what's made you vulnerable to experiencing this level of health anxiety at this time. Where are the links? What started this? Have you had a health scare? Are you anxious more generally? understanding the roots of what's triggering it for you can empower you to be able to take different steps in terms of how you respond to those anxiety-provoking thoughts
You're the
in
trigger.
the here and now.
You're Ruth's trigger.
Well, we're going to fire the bullet at you now, Doctor. We'll say goodbye to you, Dr. Sarah Bishop. All that fantastic analysis there is a clinical psychologist speaking to us from Birmingham live this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
David Mayback's gone a touch. He says, we've got no choice these days. We have to go to Dr. Google. It's impossible to see a doctor.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. So basically, this misophonia, it's when sounds cause significant problems in your life, and it affects 20% of adults. 1 in 5 of you watching and listening today, just noises that someone in your home, particularly your partner, makes that sends you erratic, completely erratic.
Phil in Rugby has got some advice for you, Eamonn. Having divorced twice, misophonia is a big red flag. Get a good lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly if your partner doesn't recognise they have it. I mean, so basically, there are things that I could tell you, folks, but I can't because they're too personal. But any sort of noise, any noise whatsoever, just basically that sends her running, and I feel sorry for her. I mean, trapped in that little body of hers.
I feel sorry for her too, but for different
reasons. Yeah, anyway. So what noises that your partner makes particularly offend you? Or, I mean, honestly...
I honestly can't think of a single noise my husband makes that annoys me. There's a lot of things he does, like leaving his bike in the hall so I trip over it on the way out in the morning, leaving his wet towel on the floor, stuff like that, infuriating. But noises...
Well, I can tell you, we sit down for a meal, right? And the table is set, and Ruth will look at me and say, are you going to eat that there? Are you going to sit there?
I hope Ruth's watching.
To which I then say, no, I'm going to take it out to the car and sit and eat it there. That's what I'm going to do. Don't speak to me like that. You know, because the whole thing is there's a bowl of soup. I particularly like something like, you know...
cream of tomato?
No, cream of chicken.
Oh, that's for when you're ill.
You don't like that,
Only
do you
when
know?
I'm ill.
I like, what's wrong with cream of chicken
you
soup?
have chicken soup when you're ill.
My mother used to make this lovely chicken broth type thing, and I've written down the recipe now that she's gone to do it with a few additives. But anyway, so when I sip my soup, and she hears it as, you know, like that, that is a problem for her. That is a problem.
Well, I know Ruth often watches, so you know, in order to give her the right of reply, feel free to text
me. You think
me.
she's watching?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you might be in trouble.
I'm in trouble then. Coming up, Boris Johnson fights for his political future. We'll hear what Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell make of the Partygate inquiry.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
We just spotted this email from Julian. You look brilliant together this morning in your matching tie and dress. I like it when people notice those sorts
Well,
of
that's
things.
another thing my wife doesn't do. She doesn't do matching. I'm just telling you, she would
Well, your
deliberately...
telly wife does.
What?
Your telly wife does.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. See, and then people like it.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't even plan this.
Didn't even plan it.
Right, to the papers. Let's take a look at what's making the front pages. You can guess who's on the front of pretty much all of them. The Times says Boris Johnson's fighting for his future as the ex-PM clashes with MPs during the inquiry.
Telegraph says Boris is besieged but defiant.
Financial Times leads with the US Federal Reserve raising interest rates by 0.25 percentage points.
The Sun reporting on Prince William's trip to the Ukrainian border to meet with troops on NATO front line in Poland.
And joining us to go through the papers this morning in some more detail is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Very warm welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
Freddie, we're going to front page of the Times with you, Boris Johnson.
Well, yes, this is the story that is dominating the front pages, inevitably. Box office. Every paper has box office somewhere in it. I think if politics is showbiz for ugly people, this is box office.
That phrase.
This is box office for bores, I think. I mean, I think, you know, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'm so tired of the Partygate story. I think, yes, Boris Johnson, it cost him his premiership. I think the only interesting part of this story is, does this cost Boris Johnson's political career? And that's really what everyone wants to talk about. But we also want to pretend that this inquiry is terribly interesting at the same time. I think the background story of this, which the Times touches on, is that the Tories want to move on from Boris. And that this Rishi Sunak's Ireland bill passed yesterday, even though Boris Johnson had to leave the inquiry to go and vote against it. It feels like he's holding them, or they feel he's holding them back.
Well, that wasn't 100% apparent this time yesterday when we were getting sort of a drip, drip, drip of news. It was Liz Truss, it was Priti Patel. It sounded like there was going to be a bit of a disaster for Rishi Sunak, and we had reports that the whips were, you know, saying you don't have to vote if you rather than vote against it, just don't turn up.
It was a bit of a damp squib. And I mean, it's possible, a lot of people are now saying, certainly in the Spectator office, people are now saying, that we're now in springtime for Sunak, you know, after the long, dark winter of strikes and so on, that he's actually had quite a good few weeks, got a bit of momentum behind him. What he chooses to do, where he chooses to go with Boris, if the committee vote to suspend him, what does Rishi say? Does he stay neutral? That becomes very, very interesting.
What do you think he should do?
I think he should probably try and stay neutral. I think it would be better to try and raise above the fray. Obviously, he would rather Johnson gone. They hate each other. But I think it would be foolish for him to try and get involved in some sort of murder exercise. I think a very interesting comparison that's happening across the channel is Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, who's being indicted probably in the next couple of days over a ridiculous technicality, a very, very odd case that's sort of been revived. Everybody who looks at it fairly knows that the only reason they're going after him is because it's Donald Trump, not because of the crime. And yet his party sort of would rather he just went away. And yet he's dominating the headlines again. So it's a similar story.
Well,
Two big beasts.
There were quite Trumpian statements as well, I think, at times from Boris yesterday when he was asked repeatedly, do you accept the authority of this court? Do you think it is a kangaroo court? And he said, well, I accept it if you let me off.
Yeah.
Which is like, the election's fair as long as I win it, right? That was just straight from the Trump playbook.
Yes, he's a sort of more polite Trump. I mean, he said he deprecates the term kangaroo court. I think Trump would have said this is absolutely kangaroo.
So while Boris is making all those headlines, Emma, Rishi Sunak does what?
Rishi Sunak has some quite... Freddie's right, he's had a few good weeks and he's been managing the politics of those. So it is no coincidence that we had as many things as possible to detract from Boris, so the big Northern Ireland vote, was a way of saying, I've got more control over you, over the party than you have, Boris. And that I think that was timed deliberately. And then just when no one was watching, Rishi Sunak released his tax returns, and we all know what we kind of already knew, which is Rishi Sunak's incredibly rich and earns quite a lot of money outside of his parliamentary salary. This was just, as I say, if this had been released a week ago, it would have made the front pages of at least a few of the newspapers. As it is, it's in page 3, 4, 5. It's not considered a big story. Now, unless they go digging and find something really, really interesting in there, I think that's the end of the Rishi Sunak is really rich stories. And that's good political management. He's managed that particular crisis well. I think Freddie's right in that this is a better time for Sunak than he has had. Whether that means he can make up a 20-point deficit in the polls, that I'm more sceptical of.
OK. And we go to front page of The Sun. They're going big on Prince William in Poland.
What to say about this?
Yeah.
It's obviously a sort of a big PR stunt for the royal family, but it's also, what royals are meant to do: go and support the troops, talk to Poland, thank them for their help with the refugees. I think that's a very worthy thing to do. I'm sure everybody else does. He wore a suit, which I'm pleased about. I don't like it when people just dress up in military fatigues just because they probably can. And I think William probably could have found an excuse to wear military fatigues, but he didn't. Although I'm going to sound like a real fogey, I think he should have worn a tie.
The pictures I saw, actually, different from the front of The Sun, were of him in a sort of puffer jacket. Did you see those pictures?
Yeah, I saw those, yeah. But I think for all these, he's for the tour, he was wearing a suit. And he sort of, the papers have tried to bill it as a sort of, he fired shots at Vladimir Putin. He didn't quite do that. I think he said fairly sensible things. And I think he's a good ambassador for the royal family. I'd say the best one the royal family's got.
Slightly confused by the framing of the story, which is secret trip. Secret trip, which was photographed, and those photographs are splashed on the front page of The Sun, and on pages 3 and 4, there's several of those photos. It's not just one photograph. I think, on the whole, as you know, I'm not a big royalist, but Freddie's right. Part of their role in life is to go and support the troops.
I want to know what the troops are doing there.
They're training.
They're training.
Training Ukrainians.
Training. They're not fighting. No, not yet.
Yeah. No.
Before we move on from the front page of The Sun, I'm quite interested to get your take on why you think they haven't even got a picture of Boris Johnson, given that every single other paper does. Do you think it's anything to do with the fact that the deputy editor was at one of these parties, received a fine in the Partygate inquiry, and actually had to apologise for it was the eve of the Prince Philip funeral?
It may well have something to do with that.
You might say that. We couldn't possibly comment.
Well, I'm asking your opinion.
No, I think it's a good question. Simon Case was at one of the parties. He wasn't even fined. Simon Case, Cabinet Secretary, who came out and... Yeah. So why do some people get fined, why do others not? Who knows? There's no justice.
There's some justice, there's just not enough of it, clearly.
Right.
We're going to talk about the menopause. Page 2 in the Telegraph, risk of menopause not examined by the NHS.
Yeah, a lot of symptoms that come when you reach the menopause or become perimenopausal, which is where the stage that I'm at, are confused with other things like depression. Yeah. And instead of going, oh, wait, hang on, you may be getting menopausal even though you're only in your mid-40s, because perimenopause can last up to 10 years, they just sort of bung you straight away some antidepressants without thinking about it. And actually, underlying causes are much more important and much more needed to deal with. So we do need more things like hormone replacement therapy, which are absolutely essential, and also things like thinking about how to manage menopause much more easily in society, because it is going to happen to half the population.
We have a gynaecologist and obstetrician coming on later in the programme to talk about the latest research into the contraceptive pill and the coil and the hormone implications, and I think we should bring this up with her. I think it's really interesting, because on the one hand, women are being told you're going to have breast cancer if you rely too heavily on hormones. On the other hand, you're being told you shouldn't be given antidepressants because it's not the best course. You know, it's very difficult
It's
to
a
navigate.
minefield,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I think there needs to be much more research into how to have safer hormone treatment. But I can honestly tell you that the difference between an antidepressant and hormone replacement therapy is the difference between night and day. And the difference that it has on your mental health, ironically. So I do think it's really important that we keep having these conversations openly and honestly and not embarrassedly, because it is half the population. It's not something to be embarrassed about.
Yeah, and you say it's half the population, but as Eamonn will tell you, for every woman that's going through that, there's the partner that's also living it as well.
Well, indeed. I'm sure Eamonn will clarify that.
Maybe not.
Well, I do know. The point being, it's like cancer. So, cancer, affects everybody that has to live with it. Everybody, and menopause affects socially, economically, so many ways.
Completely
it impacts on families.
And it is, if we may carve things off and say that's a woman's issue, actually, we know that means it will get less investment. But also, you're absolutely right. If we are going to talk about social adjustments, workplace adjustments, all of these things that we need to be making, that needs the cooperation of all of us.
OK. Freddie, I'm coming back to talk about toilets to you very shortly. But we're going to go to talk about schools. We're talking about police outside school gates. Sir Keir Starmer believes that can prevent knife crime. Does it have to be police doing that?
It seems sad, doesn't it? Yeah. That we need police officers outside our schools, but a lot of people think we do, and Keir Starmer's come out very forcefully and said Labour intends to do that. Also says Labour will cut violence against women in half, which is a very ambitious target, but obviously a very worthy one. It's Labour being the party of law and order. Keir Starmer's, been pretty canny on this, knows this is a weak point for the Tories because it's got worse under the Tories, which it's not meant to do. And this will be a big central part of his campaign in the election, is that Labour are the party that will be tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. They will be the new Labour on crime.
I suppose Keir Starmer, does have incredible expertise in this field. I mean, Labour isn't traditionally, as you say, the party of law and order, but having come from the Crown Prosecution Service, he knows crime, law, order, inside out.
He said yesterday this is his life's work, this is his life's mission, and it's a good it's a good selling point on the campaign trail.
I presume they have guards in a lot of schools in America.
They do, and they have the knife arches, the scanners.
Scanners.
Although Keir Starmer said he's not in favour of those.
I'd rather have that.
Yeah.
Than a police officer.
Yeah, I don't see why you would say have a police officer. I think they said of a security guard, not a police officer. But and then not want knife scanners.
I think there's a difference between the security in the school, where it should feel like a welcome and trusting environment, and making sure, because it's actually outside the school gates that a lot of kids are getting recruited. So those, I think the difference in emphasis is whether they're targeting the kids or whether they're targeting the people targeting the kids. So the other thing he suggested is making grooming a particular offence. Now, we don't mean grooming in terms of the kind of sexual grooming that we traditionally associate, but gang grooming, recruiting for county lines, things like that. So I think that it's about the difference of emphasis, whether you put the emphasis on all the children or whether you target the people outside the school gates.
Let's go to the loo then.
Let's go to the loo. Marvellous. This is in the Telegraph, Emma. Theatres, all gender toilets make women uncomfortable. This is the lyric in Hammersmith.
Could I just say, they make me uncomfortable.
I can't bear it.
No.
We've got them here.
You do have them here, but what you have here is cubicles.
Yes.
What is particularly making people uncomfortable in this scenario is that there is and I don't think it's all of the toilet provision at the Lyric, I want to make, but one of them is marked as all gender, but has 1 cubicle and 5 urinals, which means to get to the cubicle, you have to walk past 5 willies. Can I say willy at this time of the morning?
But urinals make me feel incredibly uncomfortable.
I don't go into any toilet with urinals in if I can possibly help it. The problem, and theatres is a particular problem, because theatres very much encourage you to snack up, get a drink, get a big Coke at the beginning.
It's such a nightmare.
And then you're sat there for an hour and a half. And if you are of any age, you are going to need the loo in that tiny 20-minute break that they give you. So women's toilet provision has long been a big conversation in theatre going. And unfortunately, partly because a lot of our theatres are very old and there were less, there just was less provision for women when they were built, and partly because of the move to mixed gender spaces, we seem to have gone backwards in terms of provision.
My daughter does drama every Saturday at the Hammersmith Lyric, but she loves looking at boys' willies. She's obsessed.
How old's your daughter?
Freddie.
She's 8.
Freddie,
worrying.
I made this terrible error once that I bought a house and I thought to myself, right, I've got 3 boys and myself in this house. I'm going to install a urinal in this, which seemed like a pretty decent idea, whatever. Awful things to maintain.
Yes.
Water dribbles into them. They make noise all the time.
Very
in the
strange.
same sentence as the word urinal.
I think women have been spared urinals for a long time, and
well, I'm not sure how we'd use them.
It's neither am I. I'm not exactly sure how you would.
The mind boggles.
Be some sight. But that was I had them taken out, Isabel.
Quite right.
Yeah.
I don't even like B-days. They make me feel uncomfortable. I think they're weird.
Yes.
Just,
Maybe we just don't know how to use them correctly.
Do you know what? You know the fashion for putting the loo in the bathroom? You know, when I was growing up, there was a loo separate from the bathroom.
There was.
And now I'd much prefer it away.
Separate away,
Yeah, why do we do that?
I'm very impressed. GB News is embracing the times and has a unisex.
It's nothing to do with embracing the times.
No,
it's just cost cutting up.
It's very embarrassing. The noises some of those women make.
This is part of the issue that women do raise, though. There are different things that women need to do in the bathroom sometimes, which involve quite muckiness. I'm trying to be really polite at this time in the morning, but you do need separate, different provision and time and space to do those things. And you don't want to be, walking out, having to wash your hands of menstrual blood as much as anything else in front of men, because it's just
in front of anyone.
A conversation we want to have.
Yeah, I go out with my crutches and often we've got 3 minutes or so, right, to go out.
Don't want to miss Theo, that's all. Yeah. Theo Michaels, it's my favourite. So should we save that story? Yeah, let's save that story. Thanks to Freddie and Emma Burnell.
That was quite the session.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Quite the session. It's just like being at home. So it is.
Should we go to the loo, Emma, together?
Good idea, Freddie. Good idea. Anyway, Isabel, off you go.
Well, let's go to Theo Michaels, because we're talking a lot about the price of food and we're talking about the price of non-alcoholic drinks. They've risen 18.2%. And we are all about, this morning, batch cooking and lots of ways of cost-saving, but also being healthy. And look, there's Theo in his very own kitchen with lots of tips. Morning!
Morning! I'm still stuck on hearing this story about Eamonn using his crushes and going to the toilet. I mean...
We've no time because of you. Just... What are you prepping for? What are you prepping, my friend?
So we were talking about meal prep and how it can save some pennies in the cost of living at the moment. And so we've just got some simple things, really. I've got a bit of a meal prep item, some frozen bolognese, and a couple of other sort of ingredients, some spices, and some tinned beans. And I think we were just going to sort of address the notion on how you can meal prep and how that might be able to shave a few quid off your weekly food bill.
So when do you recommend doing this? Is this a Sunday night task? You batch cook for the week, or, when you're on annual leave, or do you do it of an evening? I mean, what's the best way that works for you or for busy family people?
Do you know, I never buy it when I see these people that sort of meal prep 45 lunches in one go, and a little bit of my soul dies, and I think, oh, really? So I think the idea of meal prepping for us at home is just about doubling up when we cook dinner. So you're cooking dinner anyway, you're already doing it, so you just double up. So if we're making a bolognese, we'll make enough bolognese for 8 people rather than 4. Or if we're doing rice, we're going to cook double the quantity of rice, so the next day we can have a stir-fried rice dish or something like this. So my idea of batch cooking is more about doubling up what you're already doing rather than spending 3 hours in the kitchen and making 45 dishes of the same thing, which I just think is soul-destroying.
Last time we had you on, we were talking about your 5 Dinners website, and it did really well for us as well, and I hope it did well for you. The viewers absolutely loved it, because what you're doing on there is giving lots of advice on menus for the week, cost-saving tips. It includes, presumably, lots of batch cooking ideas as well. Tell us about that again.
Yeah, so the 5 Dinners concept is really great. So it means at the time of cost of living, people can sign up for free. We issue a brand new meal plan every week, and the whole concept of meal planning and batch cooking is just giving some forward thinking to what you're having for dinner. So with 5 Dinners, when you get your meal plan, you set it for the number of people that you're cooking for. So, Eamonn and Isabel, if you were coming around for dinner with the kids, and so right, there's 6 of us, we'd set the little button to 6, and then it creates a shopping list for all the ingredients you need for the week set to the number of people you're feeding, which means you're shopping with laser focus. And that's, in general, just something in terms of saving money at the home right now. It's just been a bit is one, never go shopping when you're hungry. That's a deal breaker. And just being a bit more conscious of the volume of ingredients you're buying. So if you're buying sausages, get just enough that you need for that day, or get double so you can cook it and then freeze some for another day, because you do save money the more you buy. And you'll notice that on the price, the cost per kilo, for instance. If you buy some mincemeat, a smaller packet, the cost per kilo will be higher than if you buy a larger packet. So you're actually getting more value for your money buying more, but you don't want to waste it. And that's one of the key things.
Well, we can see that batch cooking is key, preparation like that is key. We're talking about the cost of living crisis there as well. So to be prepared is to save money then?
It's the Boy Scout rule, isn't it? It's dib, dib, dob, dob, and save some cash, and always be prepared. And I think that's the key thing, is about just be prepared. I guess what you want to avoid is that scenario where you leg it to the shops every night because you're like, frantically, what am I going to cook? And that invariably creates waste, and waste means you're flushing cash straight into, you're putting it straight in the bin.
Panic buying, and buying all the wrong things, whatever. But thank you very much indeed, my friend. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
What are you preparing for lunch or breakfast today? Have you anything in mind?
Oh, I might do a little shakshuka today. I think we did that once on the show. I'm quite a fan of it now, actually. Just something to
It's
dip
what I
into.
have whenever we go for breakfast. He's like, what's a shakshuka? It's like a baked tomato. It's got egg in it. It's got peppers, and it's a bit spicy. It's Turkish, is it? It's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you, Theo. Always nice talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Right, what are you having for your breakfast today? Are you having a satsuma? Or
not a satsuma.
What was it called?
Shakshuka.
What was
not a satsuma.
Right, so you're having one of those?
Quite different.
Or how predictable? Do you have the same thing for breakfast?
What's your favourite breakfast?
I like scrambled eggs. I like smoked salmon.
Oh, right, proper
I like
breakfast.
Weetabix.
Do you?
Yeah.
With sugar on it or not?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Honey, I put honey on it,
that's
actually.
a good way of doing it.
And also, I mean, I used to love Frosties and Ricicles.
No, not allowed.
Why am I not allowed?
It's not healthy.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And you can't buy them anywhere now either.
It's poison.
They've been. Do you know what? The small box of Frosties has now been taken out of the variety pack.
Oh, is that right?
You know the variety pack with the cornflakes and Cocoa Pops and whatever it is. So that's gone. Will Boris Johnson be gone after his performance yesterday in front of that select committee? Talking about that after the break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Boris Johnson clashes with MPs over Partygate as his revolt against Rishi Sunak crumbles in the Commons.
Hello there, very good morning to you just after 7 o'clock, Thursday, 23rd of March. You're tuned into Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
And I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about.
The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said accusations he misled Parliament are complete nonsense as he clashed with MPs yesterday during a heated hearing into whether or not he lied.
Now, this comes as a rebellion he backed against Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal is easily defeated in the Commons, despite opposition from three ex-Conservative leaders.
The US Federal Reserve's raised interest rates by a quarter point, increasing the likelihood that the Bank of England will do the same today. The move comes amid a shock rise in inflation to 10.4%.
Prince William has thanked British troops in Poland for defending freedom during a secret visit to a military base near Ukraine. The Prince of Wales also met with displaced women and children at a refugee centre in Warsaw.
And we love to hear from you. Lots of emails coming in this morning. We're doing a debate in around 20 minutes' time about the rise in double-barrelled names. Mrs. Frances Fry says, I double-barrel my surname, my own Greek name with my husband's surname. Nice to be a bit different in Northern Ireland, where I live now. Went to uni here 30 years ago, and no one could pronounce my name. Kevin says, my name's Kevin Burnett Wally. I added Burnett to my name when I married my wife Connie, as I did not want her to have a problem saying her name, which would be Connie Wally.
Martin says, I have a double-barrelled name, but gained it not from snob value or from the desire to be trendy. My natural father died when I was 5. My mum remarried a few years later, and her husband adopted me. To honour my natural father and also my new dad, I have both names in my surname.
See, I think there's usually stories attached to a lot of these double-barrelled names. I think that's really nice. Let us know your views. Big debate in 20 minutes.
So Boris Johnson has clashed with MPs during a 3-hour grilling over allegations he lied to Parliament.
Here are some of those key moments from yesterday's hearing.
I'm here to say to you, hand on heart, that I did not lie to the House. When those statements were made, they were made in good faith and on the basis of what I honestly knew and believed at the time. we avoided physical contact. We didn't, for instance, as the guidance says, we didn't touch each other's pens. We didn't pass stuff to each other if we could possibly avoid it. We kept. Though not every, I would not wish to say that was perfectly implemented.
Presumably, people were passing drinks to each other because we've seen the picture.
Of course, and I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. Most important of all, if it was obvious to me that these events were contrary to the guidance and the rules, then it must have been equally obvious to dozens of others, including the most senior officials in the country, all of them, most of them like me, responsible for drawing up the rules, and it must have been obvious to others in the building, including the current Prime Minister. Nobody raised with me or had any concern before I stood up on December the 1st about those events.
You did not ask.
I asked. I did say this is complete nonsense. I mean, complete nonsense. I asked the relevant people. They were senior people.
There you go, he got a little bit frazzled. The questioning came at the same time that Parliament voted on a key part of Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal, and despite opposition from 3 former Conservative leaders, it did actually pass quite easily.
Joining us now, Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, to look back at what was termed Super Wednesday. And Boris, he was becoming quite animated there. I mean, his frustration's beginning to show.
Yeah, it was quite a testy exchange. It went on for about 4 hours. I'm not surprised anyone would sort of crack under that pressure. And he was trying to walk a very difficult line, trying to say that, yes, I misled the House, but inadvertently. Most people will be a bit baffled by that statement. His line is that he, genuinely believed that these gatherings, these famous parties, the famous cake, the famous squash, even that one in the Rose Garden with, 20 to 30 people, he says that was genuinely within the rules, necessary for work. He said he had to, see people off when they were leaving, retiring. And that because of the way Downing Street is set up, it's very higgledy-piggledy, I think is one word to use, this cramped Victorian house, there was never going to be social distancing maintained at all times. He claims that's within the rules. He says his advisors said he hadn't broken any rules. Whether anyone outside that room or in that room will buy it is another question.
Look, the average person on the street probably a bit baffled by a lot of it, to be perfectly frank. There were some entertaining moments when he seemed quite upset that he hadn't actually eaten any of the cake that was offered to him.
His Union Jack cake that he didn't get to enjoy.
Comments about his interior designer being a contractor. I mean, there were a few giggles in there for those who studied the whole thing. But there is a serious principle at stake. Where do you think this is going? Do you think that he, on the basis of what he has said and what the questions implied, where is this going?
Well, I think it will be hard to prove that he deliberately misled the House in those words, just because his defence was so forthright and was so stubborn. But he can be told that he recklessly misled the House, and that could lead to some kind of punishment.
Is that as bad, do we think, or is it,
These are, to the average person, these are just really pointless technicalities. Everyone has already made their mind up about what they think Boris Johnson has got up to. Most people are pretty angry about it, and will have been made angry by the Allegra Stratton video several years ago when she was seen to be laughing and joking about these parties that took place. If not that, then they will have seen the photos of the gatherings, although they do look like disappointing parties. I would be a bit bored if I was at one of those events. Or they will have seen the Sue Gray report. These incidents have been raked over the coals endlessly. We've seen them from every angle. Probably, probably more energy has gone into this than in any murder investigation I've ever seen. It's quite, the forensic detail on the placement of cakes and squash has got a bit overboard. So, what difference this inquiry makes is not clear.
What about the theory Freddie Gray was putting in the papers just a moment ago, which was really that this is signalling the end of the Boris Johnson era, really, not least because his rebellion was a bit of a damp squib which happened concurrently.
Well, we've got to remember that the Tory party never really wanted Boris Johnson to be leader. They picked him because they were in a bit of a tight spot over Brexit. You know, they'd just... in the European Parliament elections in 2019, they only got around 9% of the vote, which was extraordinary. So they needed a change, and they picked him. They were always very reluctant to have him as leader. And I think, yes, a lot of them want to see the back of him. And this story dragging on is, isn't good for Rishi Sunak, who wants to be seen as the kind of the fresh pair of hands, the new leader moving on. The rebellion is interesting. I mean, I actually am quite surprised at how few people rebelled and how many people, over 500, voted for this deal, especially as it's quite a shocking deal. I think a lot of MPs are going to come to regret this. The Windsor framework does not do anything that Rishi Sunak claims it does. It doesn't restore sovereignty to the UK. It certainly doesn't treat Northern Ireland as an ordinary part of the UK. This is not going to resolve Brexit. It's going to cause problems for the long run. So I think a lot of MPs probably should have sided with Boris and with Liz Truss and with Priti Patel and those recalcitrant ERG lot. You know, I think actually they had a really good point.
Thank you. Fraser Myers, thank you for your very good points. Fraser from Spiked there. The Bank of England will make a crucial decision on interest rates today after inflation, we reported on yesterday, jumped to 10.4%.
Yeah, all eyes across the Atlantic to the United States, where yesterday the Federal Reserve raised its rate by 0.25%. Could we follow suit?
OK. Comes amid concerns that continuing increases could further destabilise the banking system. Vicky Price, the economist, now with her take on things. Vicky, good morning to you. Looking at the into your crystal ball, what do you think is going to happen today?
Well, it looks more likely that they will raise interest rates by a quarter of basis points. So that is similar, of course, to what we've seen in the US. There was speculation that maybe there wasn't going to be an increase at all. Maybe we had reached the peak. And that, of course, has been affected partly. I would guess the Bank of England knew that inflation was picking up a little bit for a while, but nevertheless, it's come as a surprise to many economists in particular that this inflation rate has moved up, as you said. So the likelihood of an increase is considerably greater now than perhaps it was just a few days ago.
Yeah, it's literally changed in just a matter of days. And I'm understanding that the Monetary Policy Committee, the group who decide on interest rates, are a bit conflicted on all of this because, of course, the consequences of raising interest rates could have consequences on the banking system, which is a bit unstable at the moment.
Yes, I think we may see that again, because what happened last time when they voted, we had a couple, I think, who didn't want an increase at all. What we've seen also is that the hawks, those who really want a very substantial increase and had wanted it for a while, that number has also diminished in the sense that they're still voting for an increase, but not for such a big increase as was the case earlier. I think there is expectation that inflation is going to be coming down pretty soon. It hasn't done so yet. It's interesting, really, what people have been spending their money on and how prices perhaps have been going up and accepted by the public, which is in restaurants and pubs, which have had big increases in costs in wages, and they've had, of course, energy costs, which have been quite significant, food price costs going up, and those finally are being passed through to the consumer. The consumer seems to be reasonably prepared to pay for those. We'll see how long they'll be prepared to do so, and also how much further, of course, prices can rise. But the reality is that much of what we've seen has been due to energy prices, that the interest rate increases that have taken place so far have had very little effect on inflation itself. What they've done is perhaps slowing the economy down and causing a lot of harm, of course, both to individuals and to businesses, because costs are rising from that side as well. So I think they will ponder what to do next, and I'm suspecting that this may well be the last increase we'll see today in this cycle, and interest rates will start coming down as inflation also eventually does as well.
Do you know, Vicky, it was fascinating listening to you talking about what families will spend money on, and particularly they seem to be very accepting of cafes and pubs and restaurants and food hikes there. And I'm just seeing here a survey in front of me that says that parents estimate that 21%, a fifth of their weekly shopping is spent on nibbles, snacks and treats.
Well, someone needs to be kept happy, I'm guessing. I mean, the news hasn't been particularly good.
So right.
Yes, but it's interesting really when you look at this spending behaviour, because we may have talked about this before, but when I've come on the programme, but also travel and tourism. Obviously, since COVID, there hadn't been so much travelling in the period before, during COVID, and since COVID restrictions have been lifted, people are really, really keen to go abroad, and you've seen what's been going on with booking of holidays. And again, when you follow the sort of Barclay card and surveys that are being done on what people are spending on their debit and credit cards, you do see that entertainment on the one hand and travel are the ones that are really rising very significantly in nominal terms, but actually way above inflation. So I think there is something there. I think people are fed up with being sort of miserable and pessimistic, and you've seen even strangely consumer confidence going up slightly because people are looking perhaps something brighter may happen at the end. So I think it's reflection, if you like, of the human psyche. And I do remember when I was actually doing lots of forecasting that the one thing you can never really calculate and determine, if you like, is the consumer function, as we call it. One of the things you put in your model: how will the consumer behave to any change that takes place? You think they're going to do one thing, but they're actually going to do something different. So maybe we are in that position right now.
Goodness, we may be poorer, worse off, but we're happier. That might be it.
Hopefully.
By eating snacks. Thank you very much indeed, Vicky Price there. Appreciate it, economist there. I mean, do you know what cheers me up?
What cheers you up, Eamonn?
Maltesers.
Let someone get some Maltesers.
Well, you can't, I mean, you could literally, if you went to a desert island, you could live on Maltesers if you had to live.
My husband bought me a bag of Maltesers to do exactly that yesterday, to cheer me up.
Right, so yeah.
We walked into the kitchen, he said, I've got these for you. You've had a tough day.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Love is.
Love is.
But
Maltesers.
I did better than a bag.
What did you get?
A box.
Ooh.
And you can get...
I like the way they've designed those, so you can close them.
Yes, like there's a bit of Velcro on them.
Yeah, it's clever.
That's the big box.
Oh,
That
right.
isn't even... There's the small box, and then there's a bigger box.
Which size box did you get?
I got the big box. So
Where do you even get that from?
Petrol stations.
Right, yeah, they're the actual ruin of this country, aren't they?
Petrol
They're full of just all the naughties.
And Skittle bags.
Oh, yeah.
Skittles, we talked
Grab
about that
bags,
yesterday.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very good. What's your
right.
favourite sweetie snack? Let us know. What would you spend your last fiver on? 7:15 is the time.
Royal Matters now. The Prince of Wales is in Poland. He's been thanking British and Polish troops for their support in helping Ukraine to defend its territory.
Let's go to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker in Warsaw. Cameron, how has William's visit gone down there?
Good morning, Eamonn. I think pretty well so far, actually. It was a surprise visit for Prince William, and he's got two main purposes of this trip, really. The first of which is thanking both British and Polish troops for supporting Ukraine defend their territory against the Russian invasion. And so he spent a vast majority of yesterday in southeastern Poland, very close to the border with Ukraine, about an hour's drive, close to the city of Rzeszów, which is seen as the gateway for Western arms into Ukraine. And Prince William was there meeting British and Polish troops, but also looking at some of that military equipment, which presumably is helping Ukraine defend its territory against Russia. Then following him talking to troops and thanking troops for their collective effort in working together to support Ukraine, he came here to the capital, where I am, Warsaw, and visited an accommodation centre, because the other big theme of Prince William's trip is highlighting the plight of Ukrainian refugees and also showing the humanity of the Polish communities, who have taken in at least 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. So he visited an accommodation centre last night, which houses around 300 women and children, Ukrainian refugees who have recently fled Ukraine and therefore need integrating into Polish society. So it offers Polish language lessons, obviously food and shelter as well. There's children's play areas, there's employment opportunities there as well. And today's theme is very much all about that, highlighting the humanity of Polish communities and highlighting the plight of Ukrainian refugees. But before that, Prince William is actually echoing an engagement which his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, and his grandfather, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, did back in 1996 during their Polish state visit. So he's going to be laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. He's then going to be having a bilateral meeting between himself and the president of Poland as well, and visiting a food hall which to meet Ukrainian refugees who fled to Poland following the war, but when it started back in February 2022, who have therefore integrated into Polish society and are perhaps seen as some kind of success story in terms of how Poland has helped Ukrainian refugees. But I think the timing of this trip is quite significant. From my understanding, it was only a couple of weeks ago that it started to be organised, and that is because President Xi of China has recently completed his state visit to Moscow at the invitation of Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's seen as the two countries trying to strengthen relations, whereas perhaps British officials are very much hoping Prince William being here in Poland, his power of soft diplomacy as a working royal, is going to strengthen relations between the United Kingdom and Poland, of course, two NATO allies. And NATO, of course, is an organisation which perhaps President Putin sees as a bit of a threat, a bit hostile, but I think perhaps to quite a lot of people in the world it's seen as a way of guaranteeing global security.
Cameron, thank you. I must say, Warsaw looks absolutely beautiful behind you.
Yeah.
Stunning backdrop.
Yeah, get out of the way. You're blocking the
Let's have a
picture.
look.
Look, just let's have a look, Claire. Get out of the way. Let's see.
Oh,
very
gorgeous.
nice. Very, very nice.
Love
Thank
it.
you very much.
Thank
Stephen.
you.
I've never been to Poland.
I've never been to Poland.
No.
So many lovely places.
Is Poland nice? Is it nice? Warsaw?
I'm sure it is.
Let us know.
Yeah.
90 minutes. Well, actually, if I just keep on talking for another 6 seconds, it will be 20 minutes past 7. And we'll...
That's a condition, by the way.
Well,
That
that's-
desire to hit the minute.
Oh, no, but seriously,
Here
when
we
you
go.
go to the petrol pump,
Yeah.
can you just put anything
No,
into
it
your
has
car?
to stop on the dot.
Has to stop,
Yeah, but I
yeah.
don't like to do that because I get my hands mucky. So maybe
Well, you don't do the petrol.
I don't like.
Yeah.
I hate touching petrol
Do you?
things. Yeah, that's a condition.
Do you not stand there and sort of sniff it and smell it?
No, I like the smell, but I don't like to touch it. I don't know, who's been touching it, but I always try and find the plastic gloves, and then I think I'm trashing
that's
the
what they're
planet.
for. Oh, I never
Yes.
realised that's what they are.
Or a tissue.
Oh, OK.
Anyway.
And let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's news stories. The Labour leader promises to halve levels of violence against women and girls within 10 years if the party takes office. As he unveils his party plan to tackle crime, Keir Starmer will also pledge to raise confidence in police.
In strike news, the RMT union has called off industrial action next week. It was due to take place. It comes as discussions continue between the union and the rail delivery group in an attempt to end the long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
The UK and Welsh governments have announced 2 free ports to be created in Wales in a bid to boost the economy. The Celtic Freeport and Anglesey Freeport are expected to attract almost £5 billion in investments and generate about 20,000 jobs by the end of the decade.
So from Camilla Parker-Bowles to Andrew Lloyd Webber, we're talking about double-barrelled names. Apparently they're on the rise, increasing in popularity. So we're debating whether or not they're a good thing or a bit of a mouthful. That's up next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:25. Still to come on today's programme, from the pill to the coil at 7:45. We're speaking to a fertility expert, Dr. Larissa Corder, as a new study finds that female contraceptives hugely increase the risk of breast cancer.
Just after 8, asking Labour how they would restore trust in the police. Keir Starmer preparing to launch his plan to tackle crime.
And keep those thoughts coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News.
I follow football. And
do you?
It is unbelievable how the names, the surnames of players, you know, put the surname on the back of your shirt.
Yeah, yeah.
Will you imagine a double-barrel surname? It's got to start at about your waist.
Oh, really?
And go up there and right round over the shoulders and whatever it is.
It's on the rise.
Oh, my word. I mean, what the heck is it all about? Right, well, to answer that very question and debate that very question, Maddie Alexander Grout, who loves her double-barreled name, and Liz Brewer, who does what it says on the packet. Small and simple. Liz Brewer there, who says they're a thing of the past. Oh, I hate to contradict you, Liz. I mean, they're all the rage.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But for what reason? You know, this was something that started in the 15th century, and it was all to do with hereditary. And if you didn't have a male heir, then somehow or other they needed to combine the surnames so that, you know, the estate could actually go through the family. Or it was to retain a family name if they didn't have any young men, so that, you know, they could actually keep that name. Nowadays, I question people with double-barrel names. Why is it necessary? Even treble-barreled names.
Yes.
And
I think it's to show up lineage. I think it is to say we're all connected, or let's not forget. I mean, families all break up nowadays, and it's to remember the ones that have passed on or whatever.
Well, then there's a reason that I can understand. But otherwise, if it's to be impressive, I don't understand the reason why. Is it necessary?
Let's put that question then to Maddie. This used to be a thing for, I suppose, aristocracy passing down their huge estates. Why is it on the rise now?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on. First of all, I do completely disagree with you, sadly. I have a double-barreled surname. I absolutely love it. I have been thinking about this for a while, actually, and it's not to appear grand or to look important, although I do run a business, so it helps me to stand out from the crowd a little bit. But the reason why I changed my name and got a double-barreled surname was mainly because of the fact that I had, a terrible surname for my husband. His surname was Grout, and I didn't want to be Maddie Grout because that was not a great name.
Why don't you just ditch the Grout? Why don't you just ditch the Grout?
Well, my husband's very proud of his name. Yeah, well, my husband's very proud of his name. He really wanted to have his surname, so I thought it was rude of me not to have it, and I didn't want to keep my surname, which was Comrie. So I actually made him change his name by deed poll, so he had his middle name. So he was still James Alexander Grout, but I was the one who was being a bit of a diva and not really wanting to have Comrie Grout because I think that sounds worse, and then. My Maddie Grout was just, I thought it sounded a bit like a disease. And I was always bullied when I was a child for having the name Comrie. My dad was a rubber merchant, and you can imagine the kind of jokes that would come from a name like Comrie and having a rubber merchant for a dad. So I just thought, I'll go against the grain and kind of make up my own name. But I've had it for the last 7 years.
Well, Maddie, it sounds like a sort of creative, artistic approach to choosing your name. Liz, do you buy that? I mean, we've had an email in from Mike in Kent. He says, I think people just want to be posh. Do you think there is an element of pretentiousness in all of this?
I'm afraid to say yes. Maddie, I still don't understand why you had to have two surnames, as it were, because if you didn't like the Grout, you could have just stayed with Alexander, the first part of his surname. I mean, I was married. Hang on a minute. I was married, and very happily for 10 years. But I have to admit, I never changed my name. I had on the marriage certificate, it would have been Mrs. Elizabeth Rendell. But I had a business, just like you, and I was known as Liz Brewer, and I kept that name, mainly for professional reasons. It never occurred to me to do Elizabeth Brewer Rendell or Liz Brewer Rendell. Never occurred to me, and what a mouthful. So it's always been Liz Brewer.
But if you'd have been Liz Rendell, you could have had a show on ITV in the afternoon. Like, Liz Rendell investigates.
With lions,
the Liz Rendell mysteries. It has a sort of ring to it, hasn't it?
Yeah. But it is fascinating about the whole... I mean, I've been reading this, and the whole thing about double-barreled names or double names. And, there is a necessity for it in the professional world, but also for same-sex marriages. And still, for even in today's world, with inheritance, and that's how it started. It was all to do with retaining the estate in case there wasn't a male heir. That's the historical reason for it. With you, Maddie, I would have thought you'd had enough self-confidence to be able to stick to your own name with your business and have your married name.
Oh, I've got plenty of confidence, Liz. Don't worry about that.
But you didn't have to have a double-barreled name to get that, as you pointed out, in order to
I didn't have to, but I wanted to have something that incorporated my husband's name, but also something that I'd chosen because I didn't want to have Comrie. And I think that now it makes me stand out. I'm a money specialist, and
I would have thought it would make you stand out with your ordinary name. I don't see that adding a double-barreled name makes you stand out. I question. That I question. Mark, I looked up Grout. It does mean that his great-great-grandparents were something to do with grinding meal. So maybe you're right not to have Grout. I don't know.
I do still have grout, and my husband's very proud of his heritage and his family.
And so he should be. And so he should be.
And so the brewers, your lot were all drunks, weren't
That's
they?
right, absolutely. We were brewing away.
Well, you know, there's a rise as well, I think. I've noticed that some men are now taking their wives' surnames in a double-barrel form. What do you think about that, Liz?
Wives are taking...
Sorry, some men are now taking their wives' names, forgive me.
See, if you hadn't do that stupid look down the corner, you could just look to her
here.
Yeah.
I know, you're right.
So some women are now taking their husband... What right is that?
Right,
I'm so confused.
So some wives are taking their husband's names.
Yeah. No, I've got that totally wrong. Eamonn would be Eamonn Langsford Holmes in a nod to your wife.
And he'd be Eamonn Brewer Holmes with a nod to me, should I have been fortunate enough to be his wife.
They're still hopeless. But I don't feel the need to give anybody a nod, really.
Well, that's just you.
That's just me.
Some men feel they want to.
I still don't. I can understand it for official reasons, for reasons of inheritance, but I don't see it, for any other reason.
OK. It's a bit of a fashion accessory with some people. We're not saying it is with you, Maddie. A very interesting story, Maddie. Thank you for telling us the whole thing, and it gets people talking today about the length of their names. So can they go to triple barrel names?
Yes.
Oh, look, you've upset someone, Maddie. James Comrie's just got in touch. Maddie doesn't like the name Comrie. Well, we're Comries, we love it. It's not mundane, it's very different. See, this is such a minefield, isn't it? We're offending everyone.
It wasn't that, just to clarify, it wasn't because it was mundane. It was more the fact that it didn't go with grout. And it was, I'm actually very proud of being a Comrie. My dad's still a Comrie, but, it's a lovely name.
There we go. Guys, got to say goodbye to both of you. Thank you very, very much indeed. Your names are just too long for us to recite. Maddie and Liz, thank you. Leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Stay with us, 25 to 8 the time. We're going to talk about the hike in food costs. Prices up nearly 20%. Doing that with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 7:39. Joining us to go through the papers this morning, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and political consultant, Emma Burnell. Notice no double-barrelled names here. Nope. Anyone been tempted?
I can't say I have.
No.
Yeah, I was going to correct you.
You will have had a double-barrel name. You'll be double-barreled somewhere down the line.
Brown.
You're hiding it.
I never did it when I got married.
You're probably Jim Freddie Gray. You're probably got a... This is probably both your surnames, Freddie Gray. Yeah.
No,
there you go.
It's the most common name in Scotland.
What?
Gray with an A.
Well, I wonder why. Very grey up there. Yeah. Love Scotland before I get hate now. It's spelled differently. Anyway. Right, Emma, The Times, page 8. Sunak on front foot. This is what Freddie was saying, springtime for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, he managed to get his Brexit deal through yesterday. With a certain amount of shenanigans, he managed to get it through without completely relying on the votes of the opposition, who all went for him. So he got a massive majority because Labour voted for the deal. Whipped, and as Freddie mentioned in the last hour, there were, I think, 29 MPs who voted, Tory MPs who voted against it, but there were also a certain number who abstained, and it's believed that quite a few of those did so because they were in common support with the ERG, but they didn't actually want to go as far as to vote against it. Was not a number
of that 29 the DUP?
Sorry, 29 altogether, but the DUP made up a small portion of that. Yeah. But so it's 21 Tory MPs. I apologise, but it's I think it shows that their party management, which was in absolute chaos a few months ago only, has actually got a lot better. Certainly the whipping system seems to be working a lot better. So how much that will do or don't do for Sunak, it remains to be seen. But this Northern Ireland deal was quite totemic and important. Mm-hmm. And he managed to get that. First of all, he managed to get it in a way that surprised people, I think. And that he's now got it over the line, certainly the Stormont block part of it, I think that's really important for his political reputation.
They all get it over the line and no one cares that people in Northern Ireland have no governmental representation. They're not being governed from Stormont.
This is the problem.
That's the consequence that nobody ever really talks about. Salad shortages increased or stoked the rate of inflation, which we reported on yesterday, which is on the up.
Yes, quite a few of the papers are doing this. Salad scream is the headline the Sun went with. I mean, the experts, the financial experts, have been saying that inflation is bound to come down, or it should be coming down by now, or for months. And yet it doesn't. It stubbornly hangs on. And food inflation is the one that hurts consumers the most, and it's getting worse.
Yeah. We had an economist on this morning, and she said that most people, they'll still spend their money on eating out or snacks or various things. It's not because you have to. You could say, well, you have to eat, but they're still spending it. And it is embarrassing. If you go to a takeaway, if you go to a restaurant, whatever it is, what you actually are paying is incredible.
Well, and the central banks injected trillions of pounds and dollars into the financial system over the last few years, and that is flushing its way through the economy. The problem is now, with interest rates going up, a lot of us are putting off the pain that we're going to inevitably feel. And when that pain bites, does it cause a recession? We're seeing it in the banking sector at the moment, but it could spread to everything. It could spread to property, could spread everywhere. And it's quite frightening, I think, that inflation is not coming down, despite all these promises.
It did come down in January, to be clear.
Yes,
5.4% or something.
Core inflation is coming down, thanks to the dip in gas prices, petrol prices and so on. But food prices are just stubbornly going up.
Well, stubbornly going up, Emma. In The Sun, the boss of British Gas, his pay packet's gone up by how much?
Is it, I think, something like 3.7
million.
I'm getting all my figures wrong this morning. I do apologise.
I must get.
Well, when you're in that many millions, it doesn't matter.
I mean, what's 0.5 million between friends, right?
Sun.
It is extraordinary. That this year, of all years, when all the talk is of consumer struggles with the cost of heating our homes, and then previously we've also had this scandal, not a month ago, about the use of bailiffs to go into the homes of very vulnerable people, paid for by this same company. And yet, this is the year he's gone, oh, you know what, I'm going to have a massive bonus. He's actually rejected a bonus for the past 2 years. I would have thought that if there were any year, he should be going, you know what, this year, not sure I've earned it.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say to that. You can't argue against it, can you? I just think the prepayment meter scandal is one of the worst stories of 2023.
Absolutely.
And there is nothing you can say about it. It's totally wrong. Eventually, it's been taken seriously after...
Finally.
It took a long time, didn't it? And it just leaves a bad taste in the mouth. We can't really disagree with that, can you, Freddie?
Don't think so. I mean, this massive government energy insurance guarantees, prepayment guarantee, payment guarantees and so on, that's come out of the taxpayer pocket. That's found its way towards British Gas. I mean, he has rejected 3 pays, so perhaps he's cashing out.
Their profits were 3.3 billion at Centrica, the company involved here. So he got 3.7 million as a bonus on all of that. Very, very nice. The thing that offends me even more than that is the water utility companies. They can pour garbage into the sea and the rivers and poison all the fish and whatever, and they're still picking up bonuses for what they do as well.
They are, and a lot of them are foreign-owned, often by quite
most of them
sinister, creepy people.
Yeah.
Obscure Chinese billionaires own quite a lot of our water systems.
Freddie, the Mail talking about the hard-left eco-mob who are trying to derail the NHS pay deal.
Yes, well, just when you thought there might be a sort of end to the strikes, NHS workers have surprisingly said no to the agreement between the government and most of the unions involved about a 5% pay rise. I mean, it seemed like good news for Rishi Sunak. I still think it is good news for Rishi Sunak. Again, this springtime for Sunak, it's another accomplishment. Another problem sort of looking like it might be resolved quite soon. Obviously, the hard left, the unions, hate the Tories. They're going to try and make as many problems as possible. But it puts Labour in a difficult position because then this sort of puts them back towards their Corbynite past. What do they do about the hard left unions? Do they want a resolution to these strikes? Emma, you want to cut in?
I think you need to be really conscientious about separating a small pressure group within the union movement with the unions who are recommending the deal on the whole. There just is quite a big difference between those two groups of people. These are people who are perfectly entitled to be members of a union, perfectly entitled to try and influence that union. But I'm not entirely clear that they will be able to do that, however much noise they're making, if the union management itself are recommending that members take the deal. So this is a story that is, it feels like a storm in a teacup. It's a great way of getting the word hard left, unions, Labour in one place, but actually I don't see it going anywhere.
But I mean, they're not invented. They are there.
No, they exist, but lots of people exist. There are. It's like saying everybody on the right is like the furthest right person you will ever meet in the Conservative Party.
Nobody does that.
Well, they do that, and you complain about it quite rightly because actually it stops us from understanding that most of us live in the areas in the middle. And these hard-left people are not either representative of union members, nor are they representative of a large political constituency.
OK, well, let us know at home what you think on all of that.
Tell you what I think.
Yeah.
Here's a weird night out. In the Lake District, Grange over Sands, you can pay 350 quid for a room in a stable where you can put your hand over the top of a dividing fence and pet a horse. You can sleep with a horse.
I feel like Jack Whitehall's done this on his travels around the country with his dad.
Well, why would
like
you think of the smell?
I love the smell of a horse stable. There's nothing better.
And you can then go and visit the horse through this hatch.
Brilliant. Sign me up.
You know.
It sounds like a lovely idea for horse lovers. What slightly concerned me is looking at the bed. It looks like a hospital bed.
Yes, it does.
It's
it does.
not
the green blanket.
If I'm paying 350 quid a night, I want a slightly more luxury in my stable.
I think 350. I think you can sort of put 20 people or something in for that. Or some 350. I'm trying to see how many it is here, but for 3 people or so, anyway. But
I think Airbnb is very dangerous. we rented out our house on Airbnb, got defrauded by a criminal gang.
My God.
They got out all these credit cards.
Yeah.
And we spent sort of months trying to cancel all the credit. They got out hundreds of credit cards.
So can we find your house on Airbnb?
What's that?
Can we find your house
Not
on
anymore.
Airbnb?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Never again.
Yeah, never
There we go,
again.
fair enough.
Right.
Right, Freddie, Emma, more from both of them just after 8:30. But for now, thank you. Thank you.
10 to 8 is the time. The top stories of the day are these. Boris Johnson has told the Privileges Committee, hand on heart, he did not lie to MPs over Partygate. He says, although he takes full responsibility for gatherings during lockdown, his statement in the Commons were made in good faith. Rishi Sunak has seen off a backbench revolt by Tory hardliners opposed to his Brexit deal. 22 Conservative rebels, including Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, voted against the Stormont brake regulations.
33 people have been left injured after a ship toppled over in a dry dock in Edinburgh. A vessel which belongs to the Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen became dislodged and keeled over at a 45-degree yesterday. Now, taking the pill or any form of hormonal contraception could actually increase the risk of breast cancer by a quarter, according to new research. But whilst the overall risk in young women is low, almost half of women in this country are currently taking oral contraceptives, with many asking if the risks are worth the benefits. Well, luckily, we have an obstetrician gynaecologist and fertility expert, Dr. Larissa Corder, to answer all of those questions. I have to say, this was on the front of the Times yesterday, and this has raised alarm bells amongst women. As it says, half of women are on some sort of oral contraception. Women of my age, after having children, very often using how do you politely say it? Coils. And this is a risk that people aren't aware of.
Yeah, and understandably, it will, of course, concern amongst a lot of women. So, you know, a lot of women have switched to the progesterone-only pill or progesterone-only methods because of this associated risk that we've known about with the combined pill, which also contains estrogen. But what's interesting about this study, which is also, well, this report, which has compiled together lots of different studies and looked at lots of women over a longer time period, including those that take progesterone-only contraception, is that now it seems this link is also, that the link with breast cancer also applies to those methods too. So it is an important finding, but we have to keep it in context here as well, because though the research does show that the increased risk is between 20 to 30%, the overall absolute risk, even in that slightly older age group, so over 35 years old, is actually quite small. It's about 0.2% over a 15-year period. So it's still it's a small risk, but it is there, and it's important that women are aware of it, along with some of the other side effects when it comes to the pill.
And are women being told enough about it? Because, you know, being given a leaflet once the coil's inserted or as you leave the doors isn't enough. You need to be informed before you make that decision. And I think a lot of women would probably say, I had no idea about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, because I do think what you've said is exactly what happens, that a lot of the time, you know, many GPs, many doctors are pushed for time, and sometimes these risks are not discussed, and women just get put on a contraceptive. Sometimes they're led to making their own decision without having any of this information. And it is really important that we do talk about some of the side effects. I think a lot of women are aware of some of the more sort of tabloidy side effects that we hear about, such as blood clots, migraines, things like that. But what people aren't really necessarily aware of are things like nutritional deficiencies, which can occur commonly with the pill. So this is things like your vitamin B levels, CE can all be reduced and go down, things like your magnesium, selenium. And these things are important because they can potentially affect your metabolism, and they can also affect what happens to your natural hormones. So when we talk about the effect of things like taking hormonal contraceptives, we have to do more research to actually understand, well, how are they causing problems for women? Why are certain side effects occurring, and what long-term consequences could that have? So, for example, we also know that hormonal contraceptives and the combined pill can cause structural changes in the brain. So can cause mood disorders, can affect parts of the brain responsible for your memory and emotional processing. And that's really, really important. So lots of the time, women can find that one of the common side effects they suffer from is depression and also reduced libido, right? And that's important because I think, quite honestly, and I'm going to say it, if men suffered from some of those side effects, right?
They wouldn't stand for it.
They wouldn't stand for it. And we know that through research that's been done to try and come up with a male contraceptive.
Is this just about contraceptives, or is it about hormonal treatments across the board? For example, HRT, lots of our audience will be on that, or their wives will be as well.
Yeah.
Should they be worried about an increased risk of breast cancer?
Well, this particular research didn't focus on that exactly, and HRT in the context of using it for the menopause, is a different discussion to have. And each woman will have her own risk as well. So what is important to note with this research is that they didn't look at other factors and variables like family history, how long the women were on a contraceptive, whether they used other contraceptives before the progesterone-only contraceptive, and also their lifestyle. So things like, alcohol consumption, their body mass index, what kind of diet they were on. All these variables and things we can control are important. Okay. So it's important to focus on those.
Dr. Corder, thank you so much. Really interesting to get your take.
Thank you.
We'll have more Boris Johnson's interrogation by MPs and Rishi Sunak's Brexit victory in the Commons.
First, though, Greg Dewhurst has your forecast.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Well, the day ahead, mixture of sunshine and heavy showers, some thundery at times, potential for some more persistent rain across southern areas later. Looking at the bigger picture, jet stream is driving in mild air from the Atlantic, but also those unsettled weather systems. However, through the weekend, particularly towards the end of the weekend into the beginning of next week, something colder coming down from the Arctic. For this morning, plenty of sunny spells across the country. However, we do have some heavy showers from the word go. These spreading north and eastwards through the day, some rumbles of thunder, some hail possible, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. But in between, there'll be some sunny spells, though the cloud thickening across southern counties of England into the afternoon as rain approaches here. In the best of the sunshine, temperatures lifting 14, 15 degrees or so, but feeling a little cooler than the numbers suggest, with still quite a brisk southerly breeze across the country. Rain pushing northeastwards across the far south of the country over into the evening time, but elsewhere continued mix of clear spells and scattered showers. Again, some of them still heavy even into the early hours, and then frequent showers moving into Northern Ireland to end the night. Temperatures holding up generally 5 or 6 for Scotland, 7 to 9 further south. So a mixed start to Friday morning. Best of the sunshine across southeastern areas. Frequent showers from the word go across the north and the west. Some heavy at times, blustery winds. And through the day, we'll see the showers spring up almost anywhere. Some of them heavy and thundery with hail. But in between, there will be some sunny spells. The winds remaining brisk around the coast and over the hills right through the day. And temperatures perhaps just a little lower, 13 or 14. As a maximum temperature. Now into the weekend, it stays unsettled. We'll see further spells of rain at times, some heavy showers, and then particularly Sunday and more so into Monday, we'll see the temperatures starting to slide, the risk of some sleet and snow across the north of the UK. Temperatures below average here. See you soon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Boris Johnson clashes with MPs over Partygate as his revolt against Rishi Sunak crumbles in the Commons.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 8. It's Thursday, the 23rd of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading our news this morning.
And I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about.
Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said accusations he misled Parliament are complete nonsense as he clashed with MPs during a heated hearing into whether he lied.
It comes as a rebellion that he backed against Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal was easily defeated in the Commons despite opposition from 3 former Conservative leaders.
The US Federal Reserve has raised interest rates by a quarter point, increasing the likelihood that the Bank of England will do the same today. The move comes amid a shock rise in inflation to 10.4% in the UK.
And Prince William's thanked British troops in Poland for defending freedom during a visit to a military base near the Ukraine border. The Prince of Wales also met with displaced women and children at a refugee centre in Warsaw.
Get in touch the usual ways. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let us know where you're watching from and who you're watching and listening with.
Yeah, we've been discussing double-barrelled names this morning. Rachel said, what do you do as the next generation? Do you double up again? Foster Smythe, Jones Johnson. Yeah. Peter from Newcastle says, I have a double-barrel surname because I am a snob. Julia says, it's not about snobbery. I'm divorced. My name, Fawcett Murray, is my maiden name first, combined with my ex-husband's name of Murray. Our children are Murray, so I wanted to share the name.
Fawcett Majors, when I was in the 70s, that was the first sort of double-barrelled name you were aware of, Farrah Fawcett Majors. Married to Farrah Fawcett, married to Lee Majors, the $6 million man. Do you know what the $6 million man was?
No.
We have the technology, we have the power to rebuild them. We can make them stronger, faster, and cheaper. I don't know, something else he was anyway. But anyway, no, so he was a military guy in an accident, and basically the Department of Defence put all these robotic bits to him, so he had this amazing vision, and he had this speed, and he had this strength, and all sorts of things.
They'd need $6 billion these days, wouldn't they?
It would
Today's money.
Yeah, $6 million wouldn't be a lot to do all of that. Anyway, there we go, back after this.
Right, our top story this morning. Boris Johnson remains under pressure following a 3-hour grilling by the Privileges Committee over accusations he misled Parliament.
Now, if he is suspended from the Commons, a by-election could be triggered, potentially ending his political career. Some of the key moments now from yesterday.
I'm here to say to you, hand on heart, that I did not lie to the House. When those statements were made, they were made in good faith and on the basis of what I honestly knew and believed at the time. We avoided physical contact. We didn't, for instance, as the guidance says, we didn't touch each other's pens. We didn't pass stuff to each other if we could possibly avoid it. We kept. Though not every, I would not wish to say that was perfectly implemented.
Presumably, people were passing drinks to each other because we've seen the picture.
Of course. And I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. Most important of all, if it was obvious to me that these events were contrary to the guidance and the rules, then it must have been equally obvious to dozens of others, including the most senior officials in the country, all of them, most of them like me, responsible for drawing up the rules, and it must have been obvious to others in the building, including the current Prime Minister. Nobody raised with me or had any concern before I stood up on December the 1st about those events.
You did not ask.
I asked. I did say this is complete nonsense. I mean, complete nonsense. I asked the relevant people. They were senior people.
That's what I do in here. I ask the relevant people, the senior people in here. I ask questions of all the time.
Fair enough. Well, joining us now is
whether you get the answers is another matter.
Joining us now is our political reporter Olivia Utley. What did you make of it all?
Well, I don't think it was an absolute car crash for Boris, but I do think that he is still in quite a lot of trouble. There were some areas where I thought he defended himself quite well. I think his argument that it should have been obvious to him, he came back against that by saying that if it was so obvious to him, why would there have been an official number 10 photographer there? If it was so obvious that the rules were being broken, why was it reported in the Times and no one raised an eyebrow? I also thought he did quite a good job of lumping himself in with civil servants and, as he kept mentioning, the current Prime Minister. Feels like there's a bit of animosity there. But in saying that, if he should have known, then surely they should have known as well. I thought that worked quite well. I thought that area where he sounded most flustered, where he was most uncomfortable, and where he will probably, I think, be in the most trouble is the recklessly misleading Parliament charge. So I think he is on quite firm ground when he said that he didn't lie. But the fact that he failed to set the record straight once it had become clear, the fact that he didn't really do very much at all once he'd stood up and made the statement to make sure that it was absolutely true, not asking lawyers, not asking senior civil servants, just asking his own the people he appointed as press officers, isn't a very good look. So I think if they get him, they'll get him on that. Sort of zooming out a little bit, I think there's a bit of a problem for Boris Johnson in the way that he presented himself, because it is quite possible, I think, that he gets off on some sort of range of technicalities. But in sitting there saying that he didn't really, the guidance was only there to be followed if it were easy to do, essentially, I think there'll be a lot of people sitting at home in the country thinking, well, I didn't think that was the case. I didn't think that if I really felt I needed to have a leaving party, it was OK to have a leaving party. So I think that sort of his legal defence, although it might be technically quite good, won't sit very well with the country. So if his end goal is getting back into frontline politics, it'll be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for him.
Bit of a blow, I suppose, in a way, yesterday as well for him. This rebellion against the Windsor Framework didn't really materialise. So whether you want to frame that as a blow for Boris or a bit of a coup for Rishi Sunak, I mean, we were talking to Freddie Gray from The Spectator this morning. He's saying he feels as though it's kind of spring for the current Prime Minister. We've heard Lord Hayward this morning, the Tory peer and pollster, saying actually it feels as though it's not a certainty that Labour will be winning at the next election.
It definitely feels as though there's a little bump for the Tories at the moment. And that vote yesterday was, I think, a real coup for Rishi Sunak, because a few days ago it sounded like, I was hearing in the Commons, that there was going to be a rebellion of about 34 Conservative MPs, which would have put Rishi Sunak on dodgy territory because he would be relying on Labour votes to get the vote through. And in fact, it only came to 22. And of those 22, I had a look at the breakdown, and most of them are very strong personal allies of either Boris Johnson or Liz Truss. And most of them are either planning to step down at the next election or think the main bulk of their political careers are behind them. There were no sort of up-and-coming young things, rising stars, voting against the Windsor Framework. And I think that's partly because Rishi Sunak has done such a good job of corralling the party to vote his way, a gentle, sophisticated whipping operation. So I think this is a bit of a coup for him. And it feels as though sort of that rump of the Conservative Party that will vote against the awkward squad, as it were, is fading into insignificance.
Olivia?
OK, Olivia, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in the Shadow Justice Minister, Ellie Reeves. Ellie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, Ellie, I'll ask you why you're at a football ground in a minute, but if you were sitting... imagine this is Britain's Got Talent and you're beside Simon Cowell there, whatever, on a judging panel, and Boris is in front of you, what would your critique be of how he performed?
Well, I think with Boris yesterday, it was the same old bluster. He seems to be in denial, and I don't think people will be very impressed with his performance yesterday. Actually, I think it's insulting to people up and down the country who stuck to the rules that Boris Johnson made, and he tries to convince us that he didn't realise that he was breaking the rules. He didn't know what the rules were. I just don't think it will wash. You know, people didn't get the chance to say goodbye to their loved ones. Grandparents didn't see grandchildren. Women had to give birth without their partners. There are stories from up and down the country of the personal sacrifices people made, and I don't think that they will be impressed with Boris Johnson's performance yesterday.
Even Conservative voters, according to YouGov polls, 51% believe him to be dishonest. Interesting that the Conservative peer and pollster this morning saying, look, a few weeks ago, Labour were virtually measuring the curtains in Downing Street, thinking electoral success next year was a certainty, but it's all to play for now.
Look, you know, we're doing well in the polls, but there's certainly no complacency about the next election. Our job is to put forward an alternative to the Conservative government. And I think after 13 years of Conservative government, people will be asking themselves, are we any better off? And I think most people's answer to that will be, no, we're not. People don't feel better off under the Conservatives. Their mortgages have gone up. Crime has gone up. People are not able to get GP appointments or have ambulances arrive when they need them. So I don't think people feel better off under this Conservative government.
People also remember that when Conservatives came in, there was no money left under Labour. And I think pretty much everybody can see that whilst that administration has been in power, they've had to deal with a huge number of challenges, whether it be a pandemic or a war, or indeed trying to navigate Brexit as well.
But you look at the choices that this government has made. Working people are facing the highest tax burden for 70 years. We saw in the budget last week that rather than helping working families, the only tax cut that there was for the richest 1% and their pension pots. There are choices that governments can make, and this Conservative government proves time and time again that they're not on the side of working people. And I think that's pretty clear for people up and down the country.
Now, talking about up and down the country, well, I'm taking it that's Port Vale that you're at. There's a big clue behind you. Why at Port Vale Football Club? Robbie Williams' club, incidentally.
Well, we're at Port Vale Football Club today because Keir Starmer is launching Labour's crime mission, and Port Vale Football Club is really at the heart of the community here in Stoke. They do a huge amount of work within the local community, so we thought what better place to launch that crime mission than in the heart of the local community here.
Why is crime, it should be everybody's cause, but it's particularly a Labour cause? And we were reflecting on the programme yesterday how Labour has cleverly and subtly begun to own the label of law and order.
Well, because after 13 years of Conservative government, people don't feel safe on their streets. Crime is up, only just over 1 in 100 reported rapes result in a charge, and people think that, where are the police on the streets? And it's such an important issue. Crime blights communities, and after these 13 years of Conservative government, people don't feel safe, and that's why it's such an important issue for people that we speak to.
Has a history working in the sector, Keir Starmer, having been Director of Public Prosecutions, and he knows the system inside and out. How are Labour going to cut violence against women in half, though? That's a huge ambition.
Well, it is, but violence against women and girls is epidemic in society, and we need real change. And Labour have set out a number of measures that we would implement to end violence against women and girls. For example, minimum sentences for rapists, introducing a minimum sentence of 7 years, setting up specialist rape courts so that we can fast-track these cases through the system. At the moment, victims are waiting 3 years for their cases to get to court, which means that criminals aren't behind bars, and victims feel as though they're being let down. We would also put domestic abuse call handlers in police control rooms and make sure that there are specialist rape and serious sexual violence units within every police force. And those are measures that we could implement to tackle violence against women and girls and bring those figures down.
We were also talking in the papers this morning about how Labour want to bring in police outside the school gates to try and prevent gang crime. A lot of parents will sort of balk at that idea.
Well, we've talked about hotspot policing to make sure that we are tackling the areas where we know that crime is taking place. And if that's drug dealing outside of schools, or if it's where we know that young people are getting exploited and being drawn into criminal gangs, then I think parents will feel reassured by that. But we also want to put 13,000 more community police officers on the beat. People don't see police on the streets anymore, and we want to reverse that. And we think that will bring down those crime levels as well, and also that antisocial behaviour that blights communities.
The nickname of Port Vale is the Valiants. So Valiants, like, do you know what I mean by being valiant,
yes, yeah,
as opposed to Valiance. Anyway, that's the way it is. Ellie Reeves, thank you. Lovely talking to you. Enjoy your day at Port Vale. Thank you.
At the Bank of England.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The Bank of England's making a crucial decision on interest rates today after inflation unexpectedly jumped to 10.4% yesterday.
OK, so money, all the cost of everything going up and up and up. Where's it all leading to? Here to talk us through it, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Just a lot's happened in the past 24 hours.
It has, Eamonn. Inflation was expected to go down from 10.1% into single digits. But this time yesterday, we were looking at new data showing inflation going up in February to 10.4%. No sign that the cost of living squeeze is really easing very much. And that puts the Bank of England on the horns of a really tough dilemma, because the banking system is looking rickety. We've had market jitters. We've had concerns about another 2008-style collapse. And the Bank of England really didn't want to have to put interest rates up again, but because inflation has reversed, it may have to in order to maintain its credibility for fighting inflation. One thing that is useful for the Bank of England is that yesterday afternoon UK time, the mighty Federal Reserve, the US central bank, raised interest rates. That may make their life easier, raising this interest rate from 4 probably to 4.25%.
Whatever they do, we don't have to follow suit, but we will follow suit.
It strikes me that if the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates still when US inflation is 6%, it's coming down a lot more than ours, and we're still above 10% and going in the wrong direction, then I think the bank would lose a lot of that kind of reputation for taking inflation seriously. On the other hand, you know, increasingly economists are saying, hang on, inflation isn't due to the fact that people are spending too much. Why do you need to hammer ordinary firms and households by raising interest rates? Inflation is still due to cost push factors.
The war, the supply chain.
The war, the supply chain, ongoing supply chain issues, not least because we're not really fully recovered from lockdown. It's a tremendously difficult dilemma that the Bank of England have today, but I'd say on balance, when the decision is made at midday, or when it's announced at midday, I'll be at the Bank of England, I reckon on balance they'll raise by 0.25%, the 11th interest rate rise in a row from 4 to 4.25. Good news for savers, but if you've got a mortgage that's variable, it's more money out of your pocket.
We always talk about, you know, following a little bit what the Federal Reserve's up to. Do they have the same challenges in terms of, you know, we were talking about the salad scream, for example, in the papers this morning, this shortage of certain things that impacted the food that was in our supermarkets in February, which might have impacted on where food inflation is at. Are they dealing with all these sorts of problems?
The US is more of a self-contained economy, partly because its geography surrounded by 2 massive oceans on either side. So the US isn't as vulnerable to these international supply chain issues as the UK economy is, which is a very trade-orientated economy, Isabel. Look, it may be that this inflation, you know, our inflation is higher, as I just explained. It's quite a lot higher than the US. Our wage inflation is higher than the US, maybe because we have more trade unions. Many people will say that's a good thing, but it has led to some inflation. On the other hand, it strikes me that the UK policymakers now, they really do have to decide if they are going to try and squeeze inflation out the system. And a lot of people are going to find it difficult to understand why interest rates keep going up, and a lot of economists too. But I do think this will be the last rate rise.
And do you still think the OBR were right last week to predict that inflation will get down to 2.9 or whatever it was they were predicting?
Yes, because it may be that this reversal was a blip. When you think about it, it was in March 2022, the month after the war in Ukraine started, that you saw the real spikes in energy prices, in food prices throughout the summer leading up to mid and late 2022. So just because we're not in that spiking situation anymore, because we haven't just had the shock of war, inflation will naturally drop out of the numbers. So I do think it will be 4 or 5% by the end of the year.
Yeah, very good point you make about, you know, ordinary people being squeezed again on this as to what is actually causing inflation, and they'll say it's not them, but they're paying the penalty. Thank you very much. Big question just to end with. What aftershave are you wearing?
I'm wearing a really unusual Irish aftershave by Karan. It's sort of green stuff.
You nearly sneezed,
it's quite
didn't
rare.
you? I saw you going like that. Was that his aftershave making
No,
you
I was making sure it wasn't my aftershave. I was smelling it, so it's very nice.
Thanks a lot,
nice,
mate.
Yeah. Makes you much more attractive.
Even.
I wish I could smell it, but I lost my smell after COVID.
Yeah.
3-year anniversary today.
And can I just say, Steve Austin, we can rebuild him, the $6 million man.
Oh my God, thank you.
And then that eye that he had that saw everything
The
from miles away.
Bionic eye, Oscar Goldman, who created it.
Yeah, Oscar. Oh, I met Oscar.
You met Oscar Goldman?
Do you know where I met him? In Bolton. I had dinner with him.
That's the most incongruous thing I've ever heard on British television. I can't believe I'm part of this
sophisticated character he was. You know, the brains behind everything.
Absolutely. Wasn't it great?
Oh, great.
The apogee of American soft power, eh?
Saturday night, 6 o'clock. That was it. 21 minutes past 8. Bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise.
The RMT unions called off strikes that were due to be held at the end of the month. It comes as discussions continue between the union and the rail delivery group in an attempt to end the long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
The UK and Welsh governments have announced 2 free ports which will be created in Wales in a bid to boost the economy. The Celtic Freeport and Anglesey Freeport are expected to attract almost £5 billion in investment and generate about 20,000 jobs by the end of the decade.
Prince of Wales is to speak with Ukrainian refugees and pay tribute to the inspiring humanity of Polish people on the second day of his surprise visit to Poland. The Prince says the trip will allow him to thank troops and underline his support for them.
On the tennis front, Emma Raducanu, Andy Murray, crushing defeats for them both at the Miami Open. Paul Coyte's got all the latest sports news next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Still to come on the programme this morning. In one of her final acts as leader of the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon's issued an official apology to those affected by forced adoption. So at 8:45, we'll speak to a victim of the historic practice who only years later managed to track down her daughter. It does have a happy ending, but an incredibly moving story.
All the world's a stage. Yeah, this is at 9:15. Shakespeare Week. To celebrate, we're going to the place where the great bard lived all his life, Stratford-upon-Avon. Plus, we'll be reflecting on some of the phrases we use every day because of him.
Although he didn't live there all his life. He was born there, and then he pretty much lived in London. I know this because
Yeah, I was questioning that as I was reading that. I was, but anyway.
he went,
so things
went
like
AWOL for a long time.
if you use the terms, oh goodness me, vanished into thin air, refused to budge.
Green-eyed jealousy.
Yeah.
Foregone conclusion.
Flesh and blood. They all come from him.
Without
goodness
rhyme
me.
or reason.
It's all Greek to me. Yeah, anyway, my view is we don't need Shakespeare. He's very nice to have. He's very nice to have.
We don't need Shakespeare.
We do, well, part of that did you not hear the first time?
Well, because
we
look how
don't
boring
need
our
Shakespeare.
language would be. You quote him every day without realising.
Of all the things kids are taught in school, I think there are more relevant things they could be taught, the time could be used for. I think anybody who wants to study Shakespeare, fantastic, do it. I studied it for 7 years, don't understand a word of it, got an award for playing Henry V, but, you know, don't understand it, just, I can understand those who maybe get something out of it, but anyway, just my view, just putting it out there. GBviews at gbnews.uk. What did Shakespeare ever do for you? Back pages of the papers. Here's the Guardian. First of all, Chelsea's away victory against Lyon in the Women's Champions League quarter-final match. The Mirror, meanwhile, looks at Italy boss Roberto Mancini's comments that foreign fans are to blame for recent spates of hooliganism in Naples, and the Mail, Gareth Southgate's warning that England could fail to qualify for Euro 2024 unless they take the next two games against Italy and Ukraine seriously. I think what Gareth's got to worry about is the lack of English players in the Premier League, the lack of goalkeepers, the lack of full-backs. I mean, it really is an incredible situation. I think he's already said that they've got to spread their net wider into the lower leagues for that. But, you know, gosh, what an awful...
Was that the speech that won you the award for Henry V? I thought that was it. It was magnificent.
Once more onto the beach, dear friends, once more. Or build up the walls with our English dead.
Oh, my goodness me. Who said the world doesn't need Shakespeare when we hear you orate the way that you do, sir?
No.
Yeah.
But anyway, so England are in action, Euro qualifiers tonight. Northern Ireland are in action.
Yes, they are. So England haven't won in Italy, a competitive game in Italy, or any game in Italy, since... How long do you reckon it's been? Since the last time England won in Italy.
Oh, now you got me thinking.
So think World Cup winners 66, you know, all the great sides over this. 1961.
61, right.
So we're looking 62 years since England actually won over there. So playing in Naples, you've got Roberto Mancini, as we just heard, blaming every other fan because the football fans in Naples are such lovely people, really, and huge fans of, actually more so Diego Maradona than actually anybody else, because he was the one that transformed the city and the club there. And it's interesting because there's people in Naples and Napoli supporters that support more the club than they do the country. I mean, some Liverpool fans have done a similar thing. Not so much fans of the country, but the fans of the club. But this is where the game's going to take place. So we talked about the belts yesterday. Not the greatest place to go and play football, but the reason that they are having it there, the Italians have decided they want it to be a difficult place for England to go. And also, we owe them a win. We owe them a win as well.
When you talk about winning, I don't think where Northern Ireland playing in
San Marino.
San Marino. I don't think San Marino have ever won a competitive match.
Actually think they have. They did go 1-0 up against England. Do you remember that happened?
I do remember that,
And it ended up 9-1. I think it was 9-1 in the end.
Yeah.
That was after just a few seconds. And for a moment, it seemed that, you know, they were actually going to... The tide was turning after 2 minutes, and then the tide turned again. So, you know, Northern Ireland, it's a game that they need to go out and not only just win, but score plenty of goals. Because San Marino is probably actually a little larger than the actual studio that we're in, and maybe only a few more people. So there's a lot of Italians that are playing for San Marino, but it's a big game.
And a nice place.
So we wish them well. And also the other thing about the England game is that Harry Kane, who Isabel I know loves, could break the record for the most England goals. He currently drawing on 53 with Wayne Rooney, and if he scores tonight, that means the record will be his. So England's most successful goal scorer.
And nicest man.
And the nicest man in the England side as well.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So
The Miami Open, the tennis tournament, not good news for the Brits.
yeah, I mean it's a fairly big tournament. Obviously, it's not a major. Emma Raducanu faced Bianca Andreescu. Now she's a player who actually is very similar to Emma Raducanu. Emma lost, which is something I've said quite a few times over the past year. She won the US Open as well when she was 19. As Emma Raducanu did at the same age, and she also hit a slump. So after that, she had trouble moving on and then couldn't buy a win after that. So Andreescu is still not doing that great. It's still 77 in the world, whereas you've got Emma is 121, so it just doesn't seem to turn around for her.
No.
She needs to catch a break. Andy Murray as well got beaten. And so, we can just gloss over the Miami Open, I think, to be honest with you, and then we'll just move on from there. It's not a huge tournament, but unfortunate for both of them.
Is the Fury Usyk fight going to go ahead? Because there's some wranglings over the purse there from Alexander Usyk's side.
See, I think it's unfair. They're pointing at Usyk, whereas really, I think it's Tyson Fury is the one that's causing the problems.
Why?
Tyson speaks a good game, and Tyson says, he wants to fight anybody and he wants to be the undisputed champion of the world, needs to beat Usyk, who's got 3 titles, to Tyson's 1. So there was problems with the purse.
Yeah.
So first he was saying, I want 70-30. 70% would go to Tyson Fury, 30% to Usyk, whereas Usyk's the one with the 3 titles, but obviously Tyson's big box office. So Usyk's side have said, yeah, OK, that's fine. We'll do it. We'll take 30%. So then the next thing comes up, what about rematch? Because rematches these days always seem to be the thing in boxing titles. No, we're not going to have a rematch. So Usyk has said, OK, fine. If that's the case, that's what we'll do. So it looks like the fight's going to be on. End of April, it's definitely going to happen. Wembley Stadium, it'll sell out in a second. And then there's more problems. And now we're trying to work out where it's coming from. One side's blaming one, Usyk's side are blaming the others. But I tell you, I actually think it's Tyson Fury. I don't know what reason, whether he thinks he's not going to win or whatever reason, but it just seems to be problem after problem. And that's the thing with boxing. You just can't seem to get a decent fight on when you want to see them. It's the same thing with Joshua and Tyson Fury. And now Joshua's saying the same thing about Tyson Fury. And he's saying, I wanted to fight him, but we had the same problems as well before. So it ain't happening after all that. It's not going to happen. Doesn't look like it is going to happen.
The bell's just gone, unless you've anything to add.
I think I feel knocked out.
Right,
the whole thing. Yeah. Was it technical knockout?
You're in the corner now. There's a towel around your neck.
Yeah, but I do. I always a rope a dope, but more dope than rope. I think it's probably for me.
I always thought when they said seconds out, round 2 or whatever.
Shakespeare. Yeah. No, it's another piece of Shakespeare.
I thought they were referring to a clock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't realise it was seconds out.
You know what?
What?
Me too.
Yeah.
Seconds out.
Yeah, I thought it meant it was 2 or 3 seconds.
But the seconds who are in the corner with the boxer, they move out the way.
Yeah, very good.
You know what? Every day is a school day.
I'm just grateful we got through the sport today with our trousers on.
Yes, and no singing either.
And no singing.
Well, luckily there were no pictures involved. 25 to 9 is the time. Paul Coyte, thank you very much indeed. Coming up.
Is there an Oasis reunion on the cards? I hope so. I grew up listening to the Gallagher brothers. They've been on the phone to one another. Could they finally settle their differences? Freddie Gray, Emma Burnell have their say next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The way we were talking about double-barrel names, and I was saying about football, well, our football producer has just come in, and currently, out of 500 players in the Premier League, only 14 have double name. Only 14, all four of them play for Southampton. Let's see what we've got here. Dominic Audeli, Solanka Mitchell, that's one name, that's four. How you put that on a shirt? Emile Smith-Rowe, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Kieran Dewsbury-Hall.
We had Ward-Prowse, isn't that one?
Yes, James Michael Edward Ward-Prowse.
He can kick a ball, he can, Southampton guy.
There's a guy called Kickable.
No, that's what he does. That's what he does. He
Kyle
Leonardus
Walker-Peters.
Oh.
Crikey.
Yeah. So Kyle, is that Kyle Walker? Kyle Leonard.
Kyle Walker-Peters.
So those are two different people, not one person or four people. No, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Duje Kaleta-Carr, Joseph Iodeli, Morgan. I mean, what is the point? Morgan, Anthony Gibbs-White.
I just think
why burden yourself
the point
with all
is
that?
Absolutely what happens to the next generation if two double-barrels marry or whatever. I don't understand
Is that a four-barreled?
Yeah, I'm confused with the kids and all that. Anyway, it's...
back off the net.
We're going through the papers one last time this morning. Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell, both single-barrelled names to take us through. Emma, you have chosen the Times. Feuding parents must solve their rows out of court for the benefit of children.
Yeah, so there is a consultation happening now. There's no guaranteed legislation in this Parliament, but it is looking at changing the way that married couples who have children have to negotiate the access requirements, the custody requirements. And instead of going straight to court, they will have to go through the step of mediation. There should be some safeguards put in place so that won't be the case if there is any, for example, domestic violence. Because that would mean mediation would be almost impossible. I mean, it's a good idea generally because I believe that it will stop it getting really nasty for the kids. You can see how some couples who have gotten so far apart that mediation is impossible might abuse it in order to just keep things going. And a cynical person might say, well, the reason to do this now is that there's such a backlog in the family courts and it's just a way of saving money. I think it's the kind of measure that I would be completely in favour, and am completely in favour of in general, but I do have that moment of cynicism as to why now.
OK. Donald Trump, he wants to do a little march. He wants to do a walk. This is in the Telegraph for reporting on this. If he is arrested today, what's the plan, Freddie?
Well, there's interesting parallels with the Boris Johnson story, as I mentioned earlier. Donald Trump is obviously leaning into this story. He's having fun with it. He thinks this is great because it gets him back on front pages, back in the news. He apparently won't have to do the perp walk. He will be spared the indignity of the perp walk because he's a president.
I said the perpetrator walk.
The perpetrator walk, in the cuffs being, led around. But he will apparently have a mugshot taken, which people say he's going to use as a campaign poster. And I mean, whatever you think of Donald Trump, if you're a fair-minded person, this case against him is a complete joke. I mean, it's been dismissed at the federal level. State prosecutors have been toying in Manhattan, have been toying with whether to go after him over his taxes or whether to go after him after this Stormy Daniels hush money. It's embarrassing for him at one level because it brings up the fact he paid money to a porn star to keep her quiet. Whether or not they had an affair, he still denies it. But it's obviously a get Trump thing where they've got the person they want to prosecute in mind and then they find the crime to fit the...
Is it going to actually happen, though? I feel like we've been previewing this all week.
Well, Trump's obviously trying to make it happen, I think. I mean, over the weekend, he truth socialed it out, saying it was going to happen on Tuesday. It hasn't happened on Tuesday. The indictment is happening. So whether he has to go and do it is another question. I think that's all in negotiation. If he's keen to do it, then he will. And to a certain extent, he's calling their bluff and pushing the Manhattan attorney.
Isn't it being voted on, though, by the grand jury at the moment? So that there has been in the indictment, but that has to go to the grand jury, and the grand jury will then say whether they think there's enough evidence for it to go to court.
I think the grand jury will vote for it.
I mean, they may well, but I don't think we've reached the level of it's definitely happening yet.
And, if he does use his mugshot as a campaigning poster, do you think Elon Musk is right? If this all happens, it will actually make him get the Republican nomination in a sort of landslide?
I think to a certain extent, yes. I think, and it's also interesting timing with Ron DeSantis, who this week, his putative rival for the nomination, who this week has been he's got a big interview coming out this week. He's been trying to sort of gee himself up as the rival without clashing directly with Donald Trump. But the more the conversation is about Donald Trump, the more the better. The more he sucks up the oxygen, the better for him in many ways. Even if he is convicted, he can still be president. Okay. So you could have a very interesting situation of Donald Trump campaigning with a criminal record.
In The Guardian, they highlight this concerning situation of teacher vacancies in England, and that'll apply around the rest of the country as well. There's only going to be one loser here, the pupils, the kids.
Well, absolutely. So nearly twice as many vacancies are now have happened in the last year than happened in the year prior to the pandemic. So I think it's 98%, this organisation's found. And they are... there is a systemic problem with hiring teachers, with getting enough teachers in, and with retaining teachers. So we have a real problem now. And one of the big problems is that they are using fewer specialty teachers. So, your biology teacher or your chemistry teacher or your English or maths. Maths is really, really hard to recruit for. So they're having to use a lot of teachers that are much more generalist, trying to get sort of English teachers up to spec on GCSE maths, which good luck. But there is a real systemic problem with retaining teachers at the moment. And I think we talk a lot about whether it's fair or not to go out on strike, but we haven't talked about what is causing first the strikes and also the flood out of teaching.
Well, we also had that awful story this week of this head teacher under pressure of this Ofsted report, killing herself, her family blaming it on that, and the pressure that the schools are on. And I know that when my own kids' school had an Ofsted report before Christmas, the head teacher said the previous 100 inspections by Ofsted had downgraded every single school, and our school was outstanding, but she was genuinely worried that they were going to lose that, and there was that real pressure.
I mean, we should be really cautious of blaming any suicide on an individual.
I just want to attribute that to her, to the family.
Absolutely,
we're
completely.
That,
I know head teachers and other teachers, and the Ofsted report time is hell. It's a hell that detracts from the teaching in many ways, and there's got to be a way of inspecting schools and making sure they're up to quality. We all need and want that for our kids, but there also has to be a way of making sure that can be done in such a way that it doesn't interfere so much with teaching.
Freddie, did you ever have a desire, a vocation to be a teacher? Did you ever at any stage in your life saying, well, I could be a teacher?
I mean, I was pretty terrible in school, badly behaved. And yes, I think probably in my 20s I thought, maybe I should give something back to all the teachers who very kindly indulged me. But not a great calling. I think journalism always sort of found its way.
Well, it's obviously not a great calling today as well, because it used to be a vocation at least.
A vocation, yeah. Although, I mean, it increases their bargaining power with the strikes. So maybe they will get the pay rise, and maybe that's a good thing. I think teachers is a profession that should be well paid.
Guys, we've marked your homework. You've both got gold stars. Thank you very much indeed. Freddie and Emma back again next week. Thank you both very much indeed. Nice having you today.
Time's 8:48. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories. Boris Johnson's told the Privileges Committee, hand on heart, he did not lie to MPs over Partygate. The former Prime Minister says although he takes full responsibility for the gatherings in Downing Street during lockdown, his statements in the Commons were made in good faith.
Rishi Sunak seen off a backbench revolt by Tory hardliners opposed to his Brexit deal with Northern Ireland. 22 Conservative rebels, including Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, voted against the Stormont brake regulations.
Nicola Sturgeon will face her final First Minister's questions later today after 8 years in the job. The SNP leader announced last month she was stepping down from her role.
Now, just looking back to a big piece of news yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister in Scotland, issued an official apology to 60,000 women who were forced to give up their babies for adoption.
A government and a parliament, we can set the record straight. We can acknowledge the terrible wrongs that were done, and we can say with one voice that we are sorry. So today, as First Minister, on behalf of the Scottish Government, I say directly to the mothers who had their babies taken away from them, to the sons and the daughters who were separated from their parents, to the fathers who were denied their rights, and to the families who have lived with the legacy. For the decades of pain that you have suffered, I offer today a sincere, heartfelt and unreserved apology. We are sorry.
Well, that was the apology on behalf of the Scottish Government, and joining us this morning to talk about her experience, one of those victims who was forced to give up her child for adoption. We say good morning to Veronica Smith. Hi, Veronica. Good morning to you. Yeah, lovely to speak to you. What year are we talking about, Veronica? What year was it that you were in that forced adoption situation?
Can I first say I was in the chamber yesterday in Edinburgh listening to that. It was a fantastic speech. And we met her afterwards, and she was very simpatico to the whole thing, which was wonderful.
And you accepted the apology? Yeah.
Anyway, 1965, I had my daughter.
And just talk us through how much then, I mean, you accepted the apology, it was wonderful to hear it. How much has the actions of other people, you know, taking your child away from you, affected your life and your daughter's life?
Well, I gave birth to my daughter, and then a week afterwards I was at home. If you can imagine that, you had babies and you still look pregnant. And I had to walk in the front door as if I'd been abroad working as a nurse. And then my mind just shut down with the whole memory of it. And it didn't come tumbling out till the 1990s, so that was a long time to have it locked inside, the loss of my daughter.
And you sought to meet your daughter, to meet that daughter. When did that actually happen?
Well, I was able to trace her because I was off sick with being so disturbed in my mind. I traced her and made contact, but she was 24 at the time and wasn't really ready to meet me. She was living in Canada, so that was another constraint. And it wasn't until 2004, quite a bit later, that we met up. And
I believe when you finally met up with her, she had a little girl herself, and you were able to, through that granddaughter, experience your own flesh and blood as an infant and have that relationship with two of your own family.
Yes. Well, our relationship has had its ups and downs over the years, but we're in a very good place now. And she watched the debate yesterday from home, and it's just lovely to have her on board with our campaign to carry on, trying to get Westminster to apologise. We had a year-long inquiry, parliamentary inquiry into forced adoption, and they came up with at the end with the report on the inquiry. Very, very sorry. 16 times they said apology, but didn't say sorry.
Veronica, could I please ask you, because a lot of people, myself included, they just cannot believe what they're listening to or what happened. So we're talking about the 60s, and why would you have been forced to give up your unborn baby, your baby?
Because when I went to a social worker in the Crusade of Rescue, a Catholic organisation, no help was offered. There was help available in benefits and housing, but we were never told about that. And the immediate response was, well, you'll have your baby adopted. You will have your baby. You will go into... I went into a hostel, not a mother and baby home. And I was there from September through to March when she was born. And it was like being in prison because I had no contact with my family at all, except my mother did come and meet me every so often. But it was...
And Veronica, was it true that you were told by a doctor, if you didn't want to go through with this, just drink gin?
Yep. Have a hot bath and drink gin.
Yeah.
You see, as a mum myself, I feel tearful just even imagining what you've been through. And actually, Eamonn and I interviewed Philomena. I don't know if you've seen the film, obviously relating to Ireland, different to the Scottish story, but we had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing Philomena. And much like yourself, she took our breath away. She was incredibly forgiving and, you know, just an incredible woman. Do you harbour any rage, any anger? Because I can only imagine just feeling just furious, absolutely outraged and eaten up by it.
Yes, I'm afraid my mother had all my anger, although I was never able to discuss it with her, and I was estranged from her before she died. So, yeah.
That's terribly sad.
What would you just like to say in conclusion with all of this, the horrific story, the horrific practice, the apology that came. What would you just like to say to anyone who, like you, lived through that?
If you haven't talked to anybody, we are here to help you. Movement for an Adoption Apology, we have a website, and we will respond to any inquiries and talk to you and help you through it.
And when you say we, who is we? Who is the
Well, I
organisation?
founded it, and we have a big number of members, and we meet every so often. And our aim now is to get Westminster to apologise. We're just reforming our strategy to do that.
That's the Movement for an Adoption Apology. That's who people should contact. Movement for an Adoption Apology.
Yeah, Veronica, it's hugely powerful to hear you tell your story. I can't even imagine what you went through. Thank you for telling us about it.
Can I just say one more thing? That it wasn't picked up on any of the news bulletins.
What wasn't?
Until you had it on today.
Oh, well, that's us paving the way, flying the flag, and a big hug to you, Veronica, because it's very painful.
Nice to hear, Veronica.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you. Lovely to meet you today. Thank you very much.
Your daughter and granddaughter as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look, we're going to back. We've got all that politics and all that business that went on yesterday. All seems to pale into insignificance.
It does.
When you hear a story like Veronica's. Back after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Boris Johnson clashes with MPs over Partygate as his revolt against Rishi Sunak crumbles in the Commons.
Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or fill up our walls with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so... I could go on for like this.
And yet, you don't like it.
No, I don't think what use it is, what purpose it is at all. Optional, if you want to do it, fine, but kids should be learning other things at school.
It's not apprenticeships, it's education, it's enlightenment, it's enrichment.
Well,
it's not just about a means to an
today?
end.
Today, is it Shakespeare Day or week, or what is today? Shakespeare Week on this Thursday, the 23rd of March. What is your Shakespeare experience? Let us know. Eamonn and Isabel here.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
And I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about.
Boris Johnson has said accusations he misled Parliament are complete nonsense as he clashed with MPs during a heated hearing into whether he lied.
Comes as a rebellion backed against Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal is easily defeated in the Commons, despite opposition from 3 ex-Conservative leaders.
The US Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 1/4 point, increasing the likelihood that the Bank of England will do the same today. The move comes amid a shock rise in inflation to 10.4%.
And Prince William has thanked British troops in Poland for defending freedom during a secret visit to a military base near the Ukraine border. The Prince of Wales also met with displaced women and children at a refugee centre in Warsaw.
And we love to hear from you throughout the programme. Thank you so much for all of your emails, whether it's on contraception, double-barreled names, inflation,
anything on
Boris
Shakespeare?
Johnson. Nothing on Shakespeare.
No.
But perhaps there have been some and we haven't seen them yet.
No, you know why?
Why?
Because nobody
cares.
No,
I'm not accepting that.
Nobody
I'll find
cares. It's
I'll
of
find
no
you some,
relevance
and I'll
to
be right
anybody's
back.
life after this.
So our top story, Boris Johnson's clashed with MPs during a 3-hour grilling over allegations that he lied to Parliament. Here are some of those key moments from yesterday's hearing.
I'm here to say to you, hand on heart, that I did not lie to the House. When those statements were made, they were made in good faith and on the basis of what I honestly knew and believed at the time. We avoided physical contact. We didn't, for instance, as the guidance says, we didn't touch each other's pens. We didn't pass stuff to each other if we could possibly avoid it. We kept. Though not every, I would not wish to say that was perfectly implemented.
Presumably, people were passing drinks to each other because we've seen the picture.
Of course, and I really must insist on this point. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. Most important of all, if it was obvious to me that these events were contrary to the guidance and the rules, then it must have been equally obvious to dozens of others, including the most senior officials in the country, all of them, most of them like me, responsible for drawing up the rules, and it must have been obvious to others in the building, including the current Prime Minister. Nobody raised with me or had any concern before I stood up on December the 1st about those events.
You did not ask.
I asked. I did say this is complete nonsense. I mean, complete nonsense. I asked the relevant people. They were senior people.
Well, earlier we got reaction from the Shadow Justice Minister Ellie Reeves, who claimed the public wouldn't be fooled by Boris Johnson's words.
I don't think people will be very impressed with his performance yesterday. Actually, I think it's insulting to people up and down the country who stuck to the rules that Boris Johnson made, and he tries to convince us that he didn't realise that he was breaking the rules. He didn't know what the rules were. I just don't think it will wash. You know, people didn't get the chance to say goodbye to their loved ones. Grandparents didn't see grandchildren. Women had to give birth without their partners. There are stories from up and down the country of the personal sacrifices people made, and I don't think that they will be impressed with Boris Johnson's performance yesterday.
And Norman Baker, who's with us now, with his take and analysis of how Boris Johnson performed. The one thing I came away with looking at him was that whether he lied, whether he didn't lie, is those things will never happen again. Wouldn't be tolerating. I mean, if they talk about social distancing to such a degree, or you can't go to a funeral or a hospital bedside or whatever, I think people would just say, no, we're not taking it this time.
Well, they may not do, and I think the point at the time was that there was uncertainty as to what COVID actually meant, how dangerous it was. People were panicking about their own health and their families, and were susceptible to a message from government to tell them to stay indoors and do nothing. And I think people did that, and they felt aggrieved by that. They missed out on a whole range of activities which they wanted to go out and see friends and everything else. And then they saw pictures of the Prime Minister having drinks parties number 10. So, I mean, that was electric, and it's not surprising that that's been immensely damaging to Boris Johnson. I mean, I just want to pick up on the front of the eye, because on the front of the eye, it summarises some of the points. It says, Johnson insists that he misremembered correct information, did not see bottles of alcohol, did not hear Downing Street parties in rooms opposite, lockdown staff drinks were essential for work purposes, and his own birthday gathering at number 10 was reasonably necessary. And, of course, was a bring-your-own-booze party. I mean, it's just incredible that he's been caught out. This is the point. He's been caught out, and now he's trying to worm his way out of this difficult situation, and I don't think anyone's convinced.
But, I mean, essentially, he was trying to use what some are calling the moron defence, just simply saying, it wasn't intentional, I just didn't know, really. But does that wash? I mean, it might wash with the, you know, didn't knowingly or intentionally, but will it wash with the recklessly charged?
I don't think it does wash, and I think the idea that someone who draws up the rules themselves and is in the midst of all this going on, not knowing what it means. Well, he says he understands what the rules meant. That's one of the questions he was asked yesterday by Bernard Jenkin. It just lacks any credibility. But I think the interesting bit, moving on, if I can do that, is the front of the Telegraph. The Telegraph, of all papers, the Telegraph has been, first of all, hugely supportive of Boris. Boris has written for them. It's also been hugely supportive of Brexit. And here we have the headline, and we get the headline up on the screen. The cults of Boris and Brexit are simultaneously imploding. That's what the Telegraph says down here. Now, that's an astonishing headline for the Telegraph. And I think that is true, because if you look at what happened in the Commons yesterday, when Boris was trying to undermine Rishi Sunak with the Irish vote, and got virtually no support from anybody apart from the headbangers at the far end of the Tory party, you know, Boris's balloon has burst.
And Rishi Sunak's balloon is taking sail, some might say.
Yes, I think so. I have to say that I'm not conservative, as you know, but Rishi Sunak's handling himself pretty well. And he's clearing up the mess that Boris left, whether it's Northern Ireland or whether it's the state of the Tory party, whether it's the economy. Let's remember he inherited this nonsense from Liz Truss and quasi-kamikaze, whatever his name was, Kwarteng. He's clearing those things up. So he's actually doing quite a good job. It's not impossible, and I have to say this with some regret, because there's lots of things I can tell you about the Conservative policies I don't agree with, but it's not impossible he'll pull the thing back for the election.
Well, you're not on your own in thinking that. Lord Hayward, the pollster this morning, has been saying, actually, it's not a foregone conclusion now that Labour will win the next election. They were almost measuring up the curtains under Boris, and in the last little while, Boris was a gift in many ways for the opposition, because he just kind of tied himself up. And yet it could be more difficult next year.
It could be more difficult because the grown-ups are back in the room. Now, there's lots wrong with what's happening now. I can give you a list if you want, but I mean, one of the things that most offends me is the fact that we've now got compulsory ID requirements for polling in the local elections in May. Why? There's no corruption at local polling stations. There's none at all. Any corruption that's taken place has taken place with the postal vote. That's not being touched. But people are now being obliged to bring ID along. This is a Republican idea from the States. If you're an old-age pensioner, you can bring along your bus pass. But if you're a young person, you can't use your student ID. This is about taking people out of the franchise and filling the elections. And I find that, actually, as a Democrat, quite offensive.
Yeah. Don't know what to say to that. Yeah, fair point. Right, well...
as we used to say in Northern Ireland, vote early and vote often. That was the way it was dealt with there. Right, what else have we got to talk about?
We are going to probably talk a bit about Bank of England now. Stay with us, Norman, because we're going to come back and talk about Shakespeare with you in a little while, because I know you've got views on that. But let's talk, shall we, about this crucial decision on interest rates that will be taken today. This is after we heard this week that inflation has actually gone up in the last month to 10.4%.
We've got Jeff Moody on standby. He's at a market in South Molton in Devon. Jeff, good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, I came here during the Chancellor's fiscal statement back in the autumn, the first one that Jeremy Hunt did, and I was sort of gauging from stallholders and customers here how they were feeling about coming through that long winter. Well, we've come through just about, although you wouldn't tell it from the weather here today in Devon, we've come through that long, hard winter and we're just coming into spring. So I thought with the possible rise in interest rates today, it'd be a good chance to come back and to find out how they're going. Joe owns what has just been described to me as the best fruit and veg store in the southwest. I must admit, it's heaving with produce, Joe.
I don't own it. I work for someone else, but yeah.
Right, okay. How has it been for you? How's this winter been for you?
It's been more of the difficult things with getting the produce that haven't been available, but yeah, we've got support. We're here every week, so through sunshine and winter, so people still support us.
I mean, there is a bountiful supply of tomatoes. I've noticed plenty of tomatoes. There's more tomatoes here than there are in the shops.
Yeah, if you want to pay that little bit extra, you can still get all the things that you want. So, yeah, we haven't had a problem getting most things.
Has this winter been harder than you thought it was going to be, or easier?
I think it's hard for everyone in the winter. It's a dip in the trade, but we're just coming out of that, and prices are slightly lowering, so things are a bit more positive. Yeah.
So you have a sense that now we're coming out of the winter, things are going to start to get a little bit easier. Now, we all had that sense until last week when we suddenly found that prices had risen dramatically, and we're now expecting very possibly another interest rate rise. Will that affect you?
I think people have to still buy good quality food. So if you want to eat well, you will continue to support your local market. And we've just had this lovely award as the best market in the UK. And so, yeah, I think we'll just have to keep going at it. Yeah.
But the issue, I suppose, yes, you're right in that we all have to eat. We all have to eat food. But I suppose when times are hard, people aren't quite so enamoured with creating food from scratch because it's expensive, isn't it? Whereas you can go into somewhere like a supermarket and you can pick up a ready meal extremely cheaply.
There is, you can eat on both spectrums. You can buy we have lots of budget pound lines always, every week, that people can buy cheap and cheerful and fresh, good quality produce. And lots of it's local as well. So we've got the local cauliflowers up the top there. Really good price, much bigger than any supermarket you'll get. And for £1.20, you've got to make amazing cauliflower cheese or curry or whatever. And it's really cheap and nice.
Cheap and nice. And there's a stall down there you can buy the cheese from. Joe, I'm glad that you survived the winter. And you can get back to selling now. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me. Thank you. You too. Oh, she's gone. Well, yes, the customers are due to arrive any moment now for what has been voted the best market in England, and it certainly is a good market. And we'll be seeing how other people are coping with the cost of living crisis and what they're thinking about the possible interest rate rise later on today. But for now, back to you.
Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, To The Point is up next, 9:30. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner are here to tell us all about it. What have you got?
Deconstructing the Boris performance, of course.
What was the point?
What was the point? Nobody knows. Absolutely satirical, wasn't it, in many ways? Ridiculous.
I mean, maybe it was just to make him squirm, you know.
Well, he did squirm a bit. It went on for too long. That's part of it.
But although he started to become most unravelled towards the end, so purposely, perhaps,
concentration isn't his strong point, is it, Boris Johnson? He's got many strengths, but concentrating, he'd had enough.
Yeah, interesting. Camilla Tominey in The Telegraph saying the cults of Boris and Brexit are simultaneously imploding because there's that big Windsor framework vote yesterday. And
I think he misplayed that, Boris, by joining the revolt. 22 only Tory MPs, Liz Truss, some of what people would call the swivel-eyed tendency. I think he was on the wrong side of that argument.
What else have you got?
It's 3 years since lockdown. Today, 3 years today, when everything changed. So we're going to be looking at that from all sorts of different angles, the political ramifications, the educational, the mental health. You know, the reverberations of that are still felt very much to this day and will be.
Do you think it's like a JFK moment? Do you remember where you were the day that press conference... I can remember it vividly, all gathered around the TV.
100%.
And that total sense of anxiety and fear, what was coming.
But also completely different to JFK, because it didn't change everything that we understand about the world and politics and our increased surveillance state and how we felt about medical ethics and how we feel about whether we protect children or whether we protect the elderly. It changed everything for me. So we're going to be talking about that.
We're also talking, again, why should we let them off the hook? It is the 20th anniversary this week of the Iraq War. We're talking to a Tory MP who was actually in the first Iraq War as a soldier and the second Iraq War as a journalist. So they have quite a lot to say.
Fascinating. Okay.
Guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Indeed, look forward to that at 9:30. Next, Shakespeare Week. We'll go to Stratford-upon-Avon, where Shakespeare lived, to ask an expert if the bard is still relevant.
And let me tell you, lots of emails have been coming in, just in case you were wondering.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 9:20. We're talking about Shakespeare because it is Shakespeare Week, which is a celebration to try and introduce primary school children to his work for the first time, much to Eamonn's horror.
Well, it's not a horror. Well, primary school, well, how can they relate to that? How can they relate? I mean, you know...
Just an introduction.
What, she don't even understand. It might as well be in Mandarin. You know, it's a completely foreign language,
You don't understand it? Doesn't mean you should be afraid of it. Anyway, we could debate it till the end of time, but how relevant is the Bard in 2023? Let's get the view now of Professor Charlotte Scott, who's Director of Knowledge and Engagement for the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. Good morning. Now, I'd expect you very much to be standing up for the Bard this morning.
I am standing up for the Bard this morning and every morning. Yes, I mean, I'm thinking about what Amy said about whether it's Mandarin to school children. I think the point of Shakespeare Week and the point of the Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust's promotion and creation of this endeavour is to introduce children to great stories and great storytelling and to offer opportunities for creativity and responses to Shakespeare's stories that are their own. This isn't about instructing them into the kind of detail of Shakespeare, but offering Shakespeare as a creative practitioner through which they can form their own creative practice. And that's very much what we want to support, is creativity in schools, but also access, inclusion, and the opportunity to take those stories and retell them in their own idiom.
Shirley Percival's emailed in and she puts it in such good terms. She said 400 years later, his work is still relevant today because he writes about things we know. Love, hate, envy, greed, relationships, family, comedy, murder and so on.
So do The Simpsons. They write about all that too. But you know what I'm trying to say is you're forced... It's relevant because you're forced to learn it because it's on the curriculum,
well, look,
Charlotte,
Norman
really.
Baker's still in the studio. Yeah. I want to include you in this discussion. Help me out.
Well, I mean, the Simpsons do that, but Shakespeare certainly does. And I think you should stretch children. Shakespeare's stories are great, but so's the language when you get into it. And, you know, when I was first confronted with Macbeth at school, I thought, what is this and what do these words mean? Actually, by the end of it, I understood what Shakespeare had been doing, and apart from just appreciating the story of Macbeth, I thought what lovely language it was. Now, that was a journey. Well, and the loveliest words in it are hubble, bubble, toil and trouble. Well... And, you know, it creates, as Charlotte was saying there, it's a magnificent scenario, it's a magnificent setting, it's thunder, it is lightning, yes. It has got death, it's got everything that you'd want in the best sort of pantomime that you could think of. And perhaps Boris Johnson yesterday was saying, is this a dagger I see before me? Yeah, I mean, there's a Shakespearean character if ever there was one. Yeah. Boris Johnson, yeah. Indeed, a flawed character. So you get these characters throughout Shakespeare who are imperfect, because human beings are imperfect. So it reflects us. But that comment from your viewer is absolutely right. 400 years on, if it was no use, it would have died by now. Yeah. Well, you're just forced to do it. You'd be better off learning about how to get a loan from a bank or pay your mortgage or something like that. But I think there's better use of school time. Charlotte, we just want to see where Charlotte is there. Charlotte, where are you? Tell us about the relevance. I do understand, you know, the appreciation of the man, what he's left behind, and the historical aspects of him, whatever. Stratford-upon-Avon and Shakespeare's Association. Tell us more.
Okay, so today I'm speaking to you from Thomas Nash's house, who was married to Shakespeare's granddaughter Elizabeth. And we are next door to the site of New Place, which was the magnificent house that Shakespeare bought in 1597. And this is one of the 5 properties that the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust preserve and renovate and maintain and are open to the public. And the New Place exhibition celebrating 400 years, is your viewer so rightly pointed out, opens today in this exhibition space. And it's all about legacy, it's all about creativity, it's all about understanding that, yes, you do need to know how to get a bank loan, but you also need to know how to persuade your bank manager to give you one. And Shakespeare is brilliant at persuasion, and he's a brilliant advocate for being a powerful persuader.
And also,
well argued, Charlotte, well argued.
It's crept in where we don't realise it. You say it's all, you might as well learn Mandarin. He'd say it's all Greek to me. But it's in our everyday language. We've got a list of some of the phrases that you might not realise are actually derived from Shakespeare. If you act more in sorrow than in anger, you're quoting Shakespeare. If things have vanished into thin air, you're quoting Shakespeare. If you're talking about playing fast and loose, you've slept not one wink, you're in a fool's paradise, it's all Shakespeare.
Yeah. I mean, the language can be beautiful, but as I say, and you can make it relevant and whatever. But what about interest in him, Charlotte, in this day and age? How alive and well is Shakespeare and his legacy?
I think very powerfully alive and well. I think, you know, what's interesting about this 400th anniversary is it locates the plays that we would have lost had his friends not put that collected works together 7 years after his death, including Macbeth, which has come up already a number of times in our conversations, including The Tempest. And what's relevant again, I think, is ultimately that Shakespeare is interested in critical thinking. He's interested in asking questions. He's not interested in giving answers. And above all, he's interested in empowering people to speak their best emotions, to recognise when they can't speak and to recognise what they want to say and how to get what they want. And that remains relevant for, I think, in all our lives, in whatever avenues we choose to pursue.
I mean,
Professor Charlotte Scott,
beautiful.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit and upon this charge, cry God for Harry, England,
Who's on news?
and St George. We'll be back tomorrow. I don't know how to describe these two in Shakespeare.
Stephen and Ellie will be here for breakfast from 6, and up next it's Bev and Andrew with To The Point. Have a wonderful day.
Good morning. We're nattering then. We got caught unawares, weren't we? A lot on the show today. Lord Lister's coming in, isn't he?
Boris is Chief of Staff to talk about his performance yesterday.
Yeah,
Was there any point? Did it change anybody's mind?
Not a lot, and it's the third anniversary of lockdowns. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.